Present this item, and again, it's a general overview on the differences of what a CUP process is and how it fits into zoning and other types of administrative actions. Anna, thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. So as has been stated, this is a study session tonight just on general use permits in general. We're not talking about any specific cases, although everybody in this room knows that there is a pretty high-profile conditional use permit application being processed right now. None of those specifics are going to be discussed. The council will have heard this information and probably several times in a lot of cases. Some of it might be new. A big part of the reason why we're doing this is for the public, to help give the public some more information on how these processes work, what's included in them, what's not included in them. So John and I will be tag teaming this. John is going to be handling the bulk of it. I'll just jump in a few times, and with that, I will hand it off to John.
All right. Can we go next slide? Yeah.
Sorry, it's a new clicker.
There we go.
There we go.
Next slide. One more? Okay. So as been discussed, the purpose of this is to give some general information about the process or procedures for conditional use permit in the town of Sahuarita. Next slide, please. So first thing we need to talk about is discretion, because a lot of conversation has come up about the council's discretion. And a city or town council isn't a legislative body only. It's not the legislature, as we know, sits in Phoenix and you know is going to meet in a month. This town council, as every city and town council, has sort of four capacities: legislative, administrative, executive, and what's called quasi-judicial. When we're looking at the levels of discretion, the greatest level of discretion is when you're wearing your legislative hat. So that means you're adopting a town code amendment. You're looking at a rezoning of property, and so even though you have the broadest level of discretion, it's still not unlimited. You're still limited by state statute as a general law town. You're obviously limited by the state and U.S. constitutions, but in terms of the levels of discretion, that's when the council has the most discretion to make its decisions. The next level, when you go from sort of greatest to least, is what's called administrative decision making, and that's where a use permit in Sahuarita falls in. Now, I will say that there are a few cities and towns in the state that use a use permit, whether it's called a conditional use permit or a special use permit. They use that as their rezoning tool. For instance, Paradise Valley, I think Marana or Oro Valley, they don't rezone necessarily. They'll actually basically allow a use that's not permitted by way of a special use permit. So that's, so the lexicon gets a little complicated, but we have to remember that in our case, in Sahuarita, it's an administrative level decision. So you don't have as much discretion as you would if this were a rezoning request.
Right.
You are limited by, and when we talk about where you're limited, it's cumulative. So obviously, in the legislative hat, you're limited by statute, you're limited by constitution. Here, you're also limited by the express language of the town code. The town code and the zoning regulations set forth what you look at in a use permit to make a decision on whether to grant it with conditions, what those conditions are or can be, those kinds of things.
And John, I'm
yes,
sorry to interrupt, but some towns are under charter city, which gives them different types of flexibility.
Right.
We are not.
Charter
correct?
cities are completely different animals. So in Arizona, you have towns, you have cities, and then you have, which are general law subject to Title IX of state statute, and then you have a charter city which adopts its own its own charter,
right?
But it's still subject to some limitations. At the next level down, when you go even lesser discretion, is when you're sitting as an executive body, and one of those is when you're making an employment decision of the town manager, or the town attorney, the town judge. And then you're also limited by sort of specific council policies in addition to the other things that limit your legislative and administrative. And then last but not least is you could sit, this council doesn't, but you could sit in a quasi-judicial, as a quasi-judicial body. There, it would be the Board of Adjustment sits quasi-judicial, the Personnel Board, if you had one, or Personnel Appeals Board, sits as almost as a panel of judges. And there you have much more, you have much less discretion because you have to make your decision based on only what's presented at that hearing. It's just like a judge or a jury making a decision. You can't bring any outside information in. So just want to sort of explain that you do have discretion when it comes to analyzing a use permit, a CUP application. It's not as great as it would be if it were a rezoning that were requested. You have limitations on that discretion. In fact, I'll go a step further. Your discretion is essentially that the very basic question: do the conditions that can you impose conditions that will substantially or sufficiently mitigate the impacts?
Right. We're not talking about 100%,
right.
Correct?
Yes,
We're
substantially, sufficiently. It's hard to assign a percentage, but you have discretion to make those determinations as long as it's reasonable and not arbitrary. So you do have that level of discretion, but you don't have the discretion you would if it were a legislative act. Next slide, please. So, well, actually, is this mine or you? Me. Okay, so I get due process for a lawyer. And then there have been, in this particular instance and others, there's sort of been these suggestions. Why are you even doing this? Why are you even hearing this? This is a terrible idea. This is an awful thing. Well, the property owner has a due process right to ask for a use permit. That's why we're sitting here for 10 months or more, going through this process, staff doing analysis, asking the applicant to provide this report, air quality study, all of the things that are being asked for. It's all part of the process or procedure of a use permit. You can't just unceremoniously just reject it out of hand. There is a process right, which is notice and opportunity to be heard. That's the definition of due process. So next slide, please. Okay, in Sahuarita, we have 3 levels of use permits. We have the type 1, which is the type of use permit where the use has the least impact on the surrounding area or the community, and that's a decision at a staff level, the planning director level. And I don't know if Anna, if there's an example you can give of something like that would help.
Yes, an example of a type 1 CUP would be a home-based business in a residential zone that has a little bit more outdoor activity than you might normally anticipate with a home-based business. We had one recently which was a private school in a rural zone. Those are 2 examples off the top of my head.
Okay, and so you can see relatively low impact. Type 2, level 2 has greater impact, and that is a public or a planning and zoning commission decision. So it doesn't come to the council. I think it can be appealed, though, if the applicant or somebody doesn't like it. An example of that one, maybe?
I can't think
put
of
you on
it.
the spot.
I can look it up, though.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then the type 3 is the one that we're all talking about, which is it's a hearing process at the planning and zoning commission. Planning commission makes a recommendation to the council. The council then goes through its own process. And just so it's also clear that if you look at the code, there are a number of requirements that the planning director looks at for a type 1. There are additional requirements or a separate set of requirements for a type 2, and then there are another set of requirements for they're cumulative in nature. So you look through, that's why we talked about the process for deciding on a use permit is subject to the town's code. So you look through that cumulative set of standards that you're going to apply to your decision making.
So Anna couldn't have made the decision on her own that, I'm okay, I'll just make this a type 1, that she would look at all of the
right,
impacts
because the type of use The type of conditional use is actually defined in the code. So an asphalt plant is deemed by the code itself as a type 3 use permit in this zone.
Thanks.
So it's not discretionary, it falls within, and the town council at one point made that determination as a legislative body. So you have that legislative decision that creates allowable uses in all these different zones as a matter of right, and then it creates also uses or list uses or fails to list uses that are allowed in that zone. And then in the middle, it includes uses that are allowed with a conditional use permit because they would have some greater impact than the allowed uses by right in that zone. That's where we have that sort of spectrum of uses. Next slide, please. So this is essentially code language. The intent of the use permit process is to provide some flexibility to allow for a use, but because it has, like I said, greater impact, we have this site-specific review process. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the last 10 months, is doing a site-specific review process for the application that everybody's interested in. And the definition sort of speaks for itself. But a conditional use is a use that is permitted by the zone subject to conditions, hence the name, conditional use. Next slide, please. Okay. When you're, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, this is sort of a different way to look at it. Rezoning is legislative. You have wide discretion when you're making the decision. A use permit is administrative, so you look at conditions to mitigate the impacts of the particular use. It's very fact specific, but the conditions must relate to the development. What are the land use impacts that are triggered by this proposed use? And when I say land use, I don't mean just literally terra firma, air quality, environmental issues, water quality, those kinds of things. Traffic, noise, those are all sort of considered land use type impacts. Next slide, please. So when your analysis, and I've talked to you about this before, is when you're going through this analysis after or during your hearings, you ask yourself what conditions are necessary to mitigate the impacts. And then you ask yourself, do these, what are all the impacts I'm concerned about? What conditions are available to us to impose that would substantially mitigate the impacts? In order to approve a use permit, you have to be convinced to your reasonable standard that the impacts that are concerned over are substantially mitigated by the conditions that are imposed. All of the impacts. So if within a reasonable sort of person standard, if you make this list of impacts, traffic, noise, smoke, dust, whatever, and you look at, and then your discretion lies within do the conditions that we're proposing substantially mitigate all of those impacts. And if the application fails at one of those, in other words, if there's a condition that can't be mitigated substantially by any conditions that we can derive, then you can deny the use permit.
Now, John, is that including, because we're not the authority on all things, so like PDEQ or ADEQ, so if another organization has oversight over it, and I'm making up, if particulates, for instance, have to be under 100, and they submit a plan that says they're going to be at 50, and they're not going to say 0 necessarily, but if the bar is 100 and we're at 50, then things like the county, PDEQ or ADEQ would have to, I would assume, approve it in that particular case and that particular item. Is that correct or not?
Well,
correct?
I don't want to speak for PDEQ, but they look at it at a very narrow level. And you're right, they have standards that the person looking for an air quality permit from PDEQ has to basically lay out a plan as to how they're going to achieve that standard. And if the number is 100 and their plan puts them at 90 requirements, we can impose that. That's a reasonable condition to impose that says your plan, if you have to get a permit from some other entity or permission from some other entity, for instance, the railroad, you have to be able to meet all of the external third-party requirements that are going to be imposed on you before we'll issue that use permit. So if the town approves the use permit in and of itself on its issues under its control, but there are other entities, other agencies that they still have to meet the requirements of, the use permit doesn't issue until the other entities or other agencies grant their approval as well. So there's a time frame.
I know Anna brought up a charter school previously, and one of those conditions I remember, because it was close to the railroad, they have to be okay with it. If they're not okay with it, then we can't move forward.
We would make it a condition of ours that they meet the requirements of any other controlling, governing entity, whether it's a government or private. And for another, for instance, is if you needed an easement over someone else's land as a condition of a permit, of a use permit for whatever reason, one of the conditions would be you have to be able to show us that you have this easement. Right. And whether you get it from an adjoining property owner, we may approve all of your conditions, and that condition still has to be fulfilled. If the person never gets if the applicant never gets the easement, then the use permit is never issued. Right. So there are third-party decision makers that do affect these kinds of things.
Thanks.
So just sort of the corollary to what I said earlier is that for a use permit to be approved, the applicant's job, if you will, is to prove that it will agree to, or the conditions that are being suggested mitigate all of the different impact categories. So they have to basically bat 1,000, or I don't know, get 100% on the test. What do you want to? For a denial, it's simply if one fails, you then can deny based on that one failure. So if that sort of makes sense.
Right, but it has to be fact or scientifically
it has to be
driven,
evidence-based,
right?
fact-based. So we look at this, even though we're not quasi-judicial, in order to come up with a defensible decision, you have to be able to articulate, say in the record, I don't believe that this application meets, that the condition for this impact and this third impact are sufficient to mitigate those impacts. And I can't, and the applicant isn't offering any condition that I believe is going to mitigate that impact.
Could I just go back to that air quality one, for instance, as an example? So if the standard's 100 and they come in at 50, and Tom Murphy says, no, I want 0, would that be a defendable position?
No, because that wouldn't be a condition of ours. Our condition would be you must receive an air quality permit from PDEQ.
Okay.
That would be the condition.
I see.
We don't have jurisdiction to sort of override another government entity where the town doesn't have jurisdiction. Right. PDEQ has been delegated authority from ADEQ, just like in Maricopa County, I don't know if Pinal County, where these populated counties have direct delegation from ADEQ, which has from EPA, because but the same standard. So
right.
If you're under ADEQ, PDEQ, it's still the same standard, but that's a separate jurisdictional issue. It's similar to if we said, if ADOSH said you must have, these are your safety rules, and we said, well, we actually want, 4 people on this versus 3 is the minimum required by ADOSH, we wouldn't have jurisdiction to do that.
Right.
So it's sort of not stovepipe, but every government has different categories of authority. In the town, a town has very limited authority. Particularly when the legislature keeps chipping away at it every year, but that's the end of my editorial.
Thank you. Just a minute, John. Vice Mayor had a question.
I'm actually going to just take a time out. I wanted to let those that are standing in the back, I believe there are 3 seats open up here in the front.
1
2
over there.
together, one, but just one here next to you as well. So if you are standing and tired, please come up. We don't bite. Front row's always the best row. You get to see all of our expressions really close. I apologize, John. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. We still have one here and one there.
Rain to it then. Is that an air quality issue or a dust issue?
Continue, John, or Anna,
Okay.
whoever.
Okay, next slide, please. So these are your 7 sort of broad CUP findings, and you know, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about particularly the first 2, and I you know, we've come to the conclusion that if a use is if a use is conditionally allowed under a particular zoning category, it is in conformance with zoning, and it is in conformance with the general plan. That's just by definition. Otherwise, it wouldn't be
In the
listed
code
in the
itself.
code.
as
So
a-
those findings really probably next time we do a code review probably should be removed because they really have no meaning. I think it creates confusion. The most important one is the adverse impacts. Can they be substantially mitigated? And we're talking, like I said before, I can't emphasize this enough. All of the adverse impacts that are fact or evidence based, that are land use related, have to be substantially mitigated. And if there's a failure of one that can't be substantially mitigated, or there are no conditions that could mitigate it, then you have a basis for denial. And then you will look at other things like vehicular access and circulation, utilities and services, regulatory standards, and again, we talked about that a little bit.
Diane had a question really quick. No, over here.
Oh,
And Mike.
Could you define and quantify substantially?
no, I can't quantify it. I mean, there's not a percentage. And that's where your discretion comes in. Is it substantially mitigated simply means most of the impact, or a large majority of the impact, or a whole bunch of the impact is going to be mitigated. But you're not required to mitigate 100% of the impact. So take dust, for instance, will there be dust as a result of a particular application? Yes. How much dust? Is it going to be mitigated by various techniques, tools?
Water trucks,
what have
once
you.
a day.
And so you have discretion in that. It has to be, again, reasonable discretion. And there may be measurements on certain things. Same with noise. Noise, for instance, although we have some specific noise regulations that will apply, so you have to meet those noise requirements for industrial uses like asphalt plant. Traffic is one. Ideally, any new use would have 0 traffic impact. We want to keep our traffic exactly the same all the time. That's just impossible to do. So how do you mitigate that? But again, it's not a 100% solution of every problem. But I can't give you a percentage because it's almost impossible. Even if I gave you a percentage, it says 85%. Well, what does that mean?
So who determines who substantially is more valid than the others?
You-
Because it's all
You,
subjective.
We do.
you as a council, the majority rules.
And John, I mean, I'll give another example. If they have to mitigate the view, for instance, I'm just making up an example, and they do, and I say, nah, that to me isn't substantially, those are the things that we would probably have to be worried about. Would it be defensible in a court case, for
Part
instance?
of your deliberation and debate is on the impacts. Let's say there's a list of 27 impacts. Do the conditions that are being suggested or proposed substantially mitigate that? That you have discretion in that. Your discretion can't be unreasonable, though. So if there is I think we had this discussion, if there's a view issue that says, a 6-foot wall will substantially basically screen this use. But I want a 12-foot wall to make sure that, that's probably one of those that's beyond reasonable. So substantial is where you have your discretion. Does it substantially mitigate? And you will hear from engineers, experts, and scientists that will tell you in their professional opinion, what those conditions will achieve. And so, for instance, the city or the town has retained engineers and experts to evaluate the application that we're talking about, that we're not talking about. But those are the kinds of, those are the kinds of facts. So if let's say there's a health question and a health specialist or engineer says, I believe that this condition will adequately address this issue, you pretty much are bound by that finding or that professional or expert opinion, unless you can come up with, you could articulate a reason why you disagree, right? But there are other areas that you're not going to get an expert, an engineer, or a scientist, and that's where you have a little bit or a lot more discretion. So,
And John, how would you handle when, say it's a health question, and the applicant has a doctor, that says, no, this has been substantially mitigated, and then another physician who's licensed and things comes in and says, I totally, and this happens in courts all the time,
yeah, all the
right?
time.
And they say, I disagree. How does a council member, I think to Diane's kind of point, where does she take the, what does she use as a barometer on this doctor or that doctor on a health
Or
question?
do I have the right to say, I want another opinion?
Well, you can always ask for a third opinion. The challenge with that is if you don't like the third opinion, then you go get a fourth opinion and you get a 17th opinion. So at some point you have to make the decision. And so it comes down to when you're listening, for instance, as a jury, if you're sitting and you're listening to an expert witness, who's more credible? Right. Who has more skin in the game? Who has more, and in a lot of cases it's very hard to determine. Who's more convincing to me? And sometimes it's a tie. I mean, sometimes it's one of those, well, I'm gonna lean towards this one, towards that one. But again, the applicant's job is to sort of prove to you that the conditions that are being suggested substantially mitigate all of the impacts that have been raised. And the impacts, and let me back up on the impacts. Impacts have to be impacts of general application. So you shouldn't look at an individual person that may have a unique health issue and say, if I'm, so let's talk about air quality or something like that. So if you believe that most of the people are not, their air quality issues or the application or the request is going to, the condition is going to satisfy the vast majority of people. In other words, there's not going to be any harm to the majority of people, or the vast majority, whatever percentage you want to apply to that. But there are a few people who have unique health circumstances. I think that's the difference between 100% mitigation and substantially mitigate. So if you try and rely on, well, this one person who has a unique, or these few people who have unique health issues are going to be affected by this negatively to some degree, whereas the 80%, 85% of the people won't be, I think that's when you could distinguish between it hasn't been substantially mitigated versus 100% mitigated, so no one is affected by it. I think that's where you kind of potentially run into trouble. But I can't give you any better of a definition. Substantial just means mostly, and I can't quantify it.
But it's subjective.
It's subjective based on the evidence and the facts you hear, and you
your
applying
assessment of them.
and your judgment and
That's
using
right.
common sense.
That's
That
right.
comes into play. This isn't a math calculation. This is not. You're not robots, I hope, up there. Where you plug in data and it spits out an answer. There is clearly a human element to these decisions. It's just that your decision, I will say must be able to be articulated. Why are you voting the way you're voting? And tell me the facts and evidence and circumstances as to why as best you can. That's But so you do have discretion. It's not a, what would be called a ministerial act. I come in with my $25, I want my business license. And as long as I meet the objective criteria, I get a business license. That's ministerial. I have no discretion. But it's also not a rezoning where you have pretty much unlimited discretion to deny a rezoning. Here, it's less. So anyway, these are the findings. And again, they're not, they can be quantifiable. Hours of operation can be quantifiable, but sometimes, you're allowed to impose flexibility. Next, please. So, next slide, please. So let's talk about a few things that really shouldn't go into the analysis, and one is the effect on property values. And the effect on property values, is, first of all, it's too hard to predict because any effect that has occurred on any kind of property values, or we've heard, real estate sales, is not based on operation of an asphalt plant. It's based on fear. It's based on apprehension. It's based on concern, mostly, in other words, mostly emotions and feelings. But it also may be based on interest rates, it may be based on the economy, it may be based on immigration that's coming across. So there's so many factors that go into property values that you can't really, there's no way to mitigate that because there are things just out of your control.
Would it be like lack of a direct nexus as an instance because it's not within just that one?
It's a problem. So you've got property values ebb and flow. We know that. House sales ebb and flow, and a whole bunch of factors come in. And typically, buying a house is mostly an emotional decision. People like to think it's a financial decision, but mostly it's like, I love this kitchen. This got a great backyard. Look at the view. Those are financial decisions. You still have to make financial decisions as part of it. Can I afford the mortgage and so on and so forth? But the reality of it is effect on property values, can't be a factor because you don't know what the fact or the effect is until a plant is operating. Because otherwise you're making it based on anticipation. So next slide, please. Okay, another issue that doesn't go into the analysis is the environmental impact statement. And the reason that environmental impact statement isn't part of the analysis is because it is a federal law that applies to federal agencies. The National Environmental Protection Act requires federal agencies, when they're making decisions, to go through this environmental impact statement or analysis. Not only is it's unique to federal agencies. In other words, a federal agency is going to decide on, let's say the Department of Defense is going to decide on putting in some sort of testing grounds. Well, the Department of Defense, by going through the NEPA process, has to propose various locations, and then it applies the specific DOD environmental regulations to its analysis. And the environmental impact statement also doesn't give you an answer. It just tells you, if you go to the next slide, it tells you what the impacts are going to be. But the decision isn't always the most environmentally sensitive decision because other factors come into play, like money. If this testing ground has the least environmental impact, but this one has a greater impact, but it's half the cost, in other words, the purpose of environmental impact statement is to have a fully informed decision, including impact on environment. And like I said, there are usually multiple locations or multiple operations, different kinds of operations. So if the difference, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just remember a point of entry, I think it's around Douglas, that they were looking at doing an EIS because do they put it here, do they put it there? And one of them had some historic buildings on it. So that was going to trump almost, any other kinds of decision, whether they had legal authority to take these historic buildings down. So I was just trying to think of an example of it.
And environmental impact analysis often, a lot of times is also litigated in court because the Sierra Club or some other environmental group will challenge the analysis because you didn't take into account how important this breeding ground for turtles is or something like that. So it's not a binary kind of decision making. The environmental impact statement doesn't tell you yes or no. It just makes you aware of all of the potential environmental impacts that a proposed use in this location versus this location versus a no decision or decision not to, no action decision. So it doesn't fit in with what we're talking about. It can't be done essentially because most importantly, they're applying their own set of environmental regulations for each department. So Department of Energy may have different regulations versus Department of Defense versus other departments. And so they all have their own set of environmental regulations that are looked at and applied to. We don't have any of that. So, it's just not something that it's just not possible to do. If you can go to the next slide. So this is what an EIS does. It's an assessment tool. Well, for the topic we're not talking about, we're doing a whole lot of assessment on environmental issues, air quality. We're doing traffic assessments. We're doing all of the stuff that would typically go into an environmental assessment. But environmental assessment or EIS doesn't do what you're going to do, which is make a yes or no decision. It simply creates an awareness or allows for fully informed decision by the department itself. And unless a federal judge tells them you can't make that decision, they're going to go ahead and make that decision and place that tank testing ground here versus there. So this system is actually more finite and more decisive than an environmental impact statement or environmental assessment gives you. So next slide, and this is sort of just repetitious, I don't need to go into it. Again, it measures the impacts. And so go to the last slide. So as I said before, these are the statutes. If you look at the smaller bullet points, those are all the statutes that would apply to, or that would be looked at as part of an EIS.
Wow.
That just doesn't work in our situation here. We don't have the legal authority to impose or to require that an applicant comply with the Clean Air Act. Now, they have to comply with the Clean Air Act by way of EPA to ADEQ to PDEQ in a particular case, or Clean Water Act. But that again, the town has very limited jurisdiction in imposing those things. Endangered Species Act is another. They have to comply with them, but via a different government agency.
An agency, right.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of spin through. There's really the rest of the slides just sort of repeat. I just wanted to give kind of a full or a coverage to the EIS question because it's complicated. And it's not to say that we aren't doing a small e, small a environmental assessment when it comes to questions for use permits. It's being done. Traffic, noise, dust, smoke, odor, air quality, all those things are in and of themselves a type of assessment of the impacts on the environment and human health as well. So all those things are done as part of this. And so trying to impose this EIS process just doesn't make any sense, and it's impossible to do. So with that, I thought Anna would do a little bit more work on this one, but I have nothing else to say.
Anna, did you want to add anything just from the planning perspective? I know when you get a specific plan amendment or is submitted to you, there's processes in place that we have to go through, and this is just another example. You can't, as Anna, say, I don't like hamburgers, so if McDonald's wants to open in our town, we can say, I'm vegan. I can't do that. I mean, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but if you want to add any comments.
No, thank you, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. That's a great analogy. I have very little discretion to just decide what I, as Anna, or as a human being, or a resident, or anything else would like to do. The decisions that I make as a planning director, the code in a lot of cases gives me the guidance to make those decisions, and if the criteria are met, it gets approved. If they're not met, it doesn't get approved. There is some discretion to, one thing that didn't come up, we talked a little bit about the code spelling out which CUP process applies to certain uses. There are some uses that are not mentioned in the code, things that come up that nobody thought of when they wrote the code, new uses, things like solar farms, for example, are not covered by our code. So if somebody came in and wanted to have a solar farm here, the code, in most of the zones that we have, it gives me the discretion to take these unmentioned uses, figure out what they're most similar to, and then follow that process. So those are the cases where there is a little bit of discretion in that decision-making as to what process it's going to follow, but in most cases, it's just very clear-cut, the process that we have to follow and the criteria that are used to make the recommendations or the decisions.
Recommendation to look at as well. You're not bound by a decision since it's a recommendation, but it's a group that's more, is going to be specifically focused on land use issues, whereas the council is focusing on a whole bunch of different things.
Right.
So they're sort of more, I would say greater level of expertise, but that's kind of what they're charged with doing.
Right. Thank you. Bill, Simon?
John, can you just explain, so a conditional use permit gets issued to an applicant, they then have to meet everything on that permit, and failure to meet those would basically have the permit pulled and they wouldn't be able to do business?
There's an enforcement mechanism in every use permit that's issued, so that the conditions are typically ongoing. Maybe, well, let's say it's a building height use, there's a part of the conditional use permit is the height of the building. That's kind of a one-time thing, right? But there are other conditions that are going to be ongoing, and so every use permit has a built-in enforcement mechanism where ultimately, if there's a continued violation of one or more of the conditions, then the permit through a hearing process can be revoked.
And this sort of just came to me, Anna, but I remember when there was a rezoning for a parcel on the north end of Sahuarita, and there was a lot of conditions put on it, and then there was an initiative to overturn, but that was because that was a zoning case, correct? Or if John can touch on that, well, you weren't here then, so you may not remember it. But how does that differ than a CUP as opposed to a rezoning?
So I'll give a little bit of history on this for the community members who weren't here back then, and for John, and then John will probably be able to jump in a little bit better than I can on the legal aspects of it. But that case you're talking about, that was a rezoning, and it was approved by the town council, and then the voters did a referendum to have that decision reversed. So the difference, I'll let John explain a little bit better, but it's the rezoning versus the conditional use permit process. There is no referendum for a CUP.
So the Constitution gives people the right of referendum and initiative on legislative acts. And so we talked about a rezoning being a legislative act. It is subject to a referendum. An administrative act, a use permit, is not. So that's kind of the basic difference. And a referendum for a legislative act like rezoning is really a two-step process. The opponents have 30 days to collect enough signatures, 10% of the number of who voted in the last election, and then that's just to get it on the ballot. And then it goes to a vote, and the majority has to vote against or for the rezoning, let's say.
And that's why I brought it up, because of the different legislative or different authorities that we have. And I
Right.
know there's a vast difference between zoning and rezoning in a CUP,
Right.
so I just wanted to touch on that for a second. Debbie, you have anything? Bill? Kara? Diane? Of course.
Of course. So, let's get back to the substantially.
You're killing me.
So your wall's 6 feet tall, and that substantially mitigates the issue. In my assessment, after everything that I've analyzed and assessed and weighed and looked at, I think I need 8 feet. I'm not asking for 12, but I really think I need 8 feet.
You were.
At what point can I, and we have expert witness that says, nah, 6 feet's fine, that's my expert opinion, I've assessed it, I think it substantially meets it. But in my own analysis and everything that I've processed and weighed and looked at, I think we need the 8 feet. At what point can I ask for a second opinion?
Like I said, you can always ask for a second opinion. It creates, it creates a delay in the process.
Right?
But I think if you believe there's a need for an 8-foot wall, you better be able to tell us why, based on the facts and evidence. Without an expert, well, you don't need an expert opinion to give you the reason. If the opinion of whomever, the applicant, the staff, or whomever says a 6-foot wall substantially mitigates the view problem here, and you say, I want 8 feet, you have to be able to say why you want 8 feet. You don't require an expert for that.
You just have to be able to articulate.
Be able to say why. Why do you need 2 more feet? And if it's because I like the number 8, it's probably not. I'm trying to be obvious in this because there are a lot of nuanced issues. 6 is bad luck or whatever. Those are essentially arbitrary. But if you say I want 8 because because if you're 10 feet away or 100 feet away, you're on flat ground. But as you go 500 feet away, it slopes upwards, and if you're sloping upwards, you can see over the 6-foot wall. And so I want the people who are 500 feet away to not see the top of the thing. And if you put an 8-foot wall, it'll block that view. They'll see, or trees or what have you. That would be articulating the reason why you want 2 more feet on the wall.
And what if you don't have assurance in the credibility of the expert witness, and you want a second opinion
Again,
because it's a weight thing?
You can always ask for a second opinion, but you have to get at least 3 more people to agree with you in order to proceed forward.
Okay, that's the answer I was looking for.
It's not Diane or Council Member Priolo saying, I want a second opinion. My recommendation would be if the council, at least as a majority, wants more information, whether it's a second opinion or we need more data or we need a little bit more analysis or come back to us with more. It should be, particularly if you're asking for a professional, an assignment of more work or more money, then I would recommend that you have at least a majority of the council agree with you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Everybody good for now? Okay, we'll move on. Item number 6 is called to the public. We still provide the option for a spokesperson to speak on behalf of the group. Some individuals have inquired about the possibility of transferring their comment time to another speaker, always willing to grant that to a maximum of 10 minutes on behalf of a group of 10 or more present at the meeting. Additionally, we'll move to extend the invitation at this time for any member of the public to address the town council regarding any topic on tonight's consent agenda or any issue which the town council is legally permitted to act upon at a future meeting. As per the Arizona open meeting laws, the council cannot discuss these matters. However, individual council members may respond to criticism made by the speakers, request staff to review the matter, or propose adding to a future agenda. And I have just a couple tonight. First is James Bergstrand, And I think a lot of the folks know that we have 3 lights. Green is go, yellow means you have a minute left, and red is your 3 minutes is up. And I've always been very appreciative of how our citizens have always abided by that. So welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. My name is Jim Bergstrand. I live in Quail Creek, and I have spoken to you and have written to you about conditions to be placed on the Vulcan proposed cup. On Friday, you received a letter from Cameron Artigue, arguably one of the best land use attorneys in Arizona. In it, he describes 2 issues already resolved in court regarding local citizens and nearby asphalt plants. First, that the proposed use generated significant public controversy within Marana. And second, that, quote, neighborhood opposition to the granting of a conditional use permit is not unlawful and should be considered, unquote. I cannot ask you what you think of the letter and its contents and suggestions. What I can ask you is this, though, I think. Do you believe that there is significant public controversy within the town of Sahuarita over the proposed Vulcan asphalt plant, and that there is significant neighborhood opposition from the closest neighborhoods of Quail Creek and Rancho Sahuarita? That's my question. Is a petition with about 1,000 signatures, emails from probably over 1,000 people, and a Facebook site with a bit less than 1,000 members not enough? If your individual answers are no, I don't believe there is sufficient opposition to the proposed plant yet, I will offer a solution to help you. On January 9th, we will hold an information meeting in Quail Creek on the topic of the Vulcan Cup. We concerned citizens have already said no to supporting an active picket protest of the town hall. We thought sending you multiple letters with straightforward logic and facts would be enough. To help you understand the opposition, perhaps we should unleash the picketers. We are a product of the 60s. I can foresee a large, peaceful group of senior citizens walking a picket line along with their walkers, canes, a few wheelchairs, and oxygen bottles. We would videotape it, include in it your town email addresses, and release it on social media. It would simply be a request for the viewer to write to you and state their opposition to the asphalt plant. I expect that it might go viral. You would then get maybe 10,000, 20,000 or more emails stating opposition to an asphalt plant. That should convince you of the size of the opposition. If each of you already believes that there's significant opposition to the Vulcan plant, then we won't need to picket and produce the viral video. We would just have a yes or no answer to that straightforward question. If you can't answer tonight, talk to your town manager. He has my contact information. We would like to hear from each of you. Thank you for your time. I'll be available for discussion or questions at your convenience.
Thank you. Carl Larson. And then Gail Baumgartner will be next.
Oh, do I have a lot to say? It may not take a whole 3 minutes, but we'll see if we can get it in. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and neighbors. My name is Carl Larson, and I'm a volunteer for Concerned Citizen of Sahuarita and homeowner in the QC since 2005. I first stood up in March and spoke to you about the value and beauty of living in QC. Then in September, I spoke to you regarding concerns about supplemental fire insurance we might be forced to purchase should this plant have a catastrophic fire. In October, we provided you with a handout titled Just Say No and the Myths of Living Next to an Asphalt Plant, which will affect our most vulnerable adults, which will be talked by Maggie Klimek of Lisa Moe and Mike Klimek, and our children. We stood before you in November and we gave you personal accounts of how this process is scaring people in the community. To update you the issue that continues to grow. There are now 63 homes for sale in QC alone and approximately 270 homes for sale in all of Green Valley. This is by far the largest amount of previously lived in homes for sale I have ever seen since visiting here in 1999. Tonight we provide you with the results of a survey we posted on Nextdoor, whereas tonight we had over 7,700 views. Of the 290 responses, 84% of the responses were concerned about contamination of the aquifer. Vulcan poses putting the plant in a 65-foot hole 70 feet from the aquifer. What will the town do to help prevent the contamination of the aquifer should a hazmat accident occur? Is there a plan? What has Vulcan devised safety-wise to prevent such an accident from occurring? After consultation we had with the Center for Health and Environmental Justice, we already live in a Superfund area because of wastewater contamination. It's listed on the EPA EJ Screen website, which I put on that piece of paper. Is there something else that we could have to do to deal with as a community should we decide to grant the CUP? At last call, the public meeting of the fellow CCS volunteers spoke about the International Fire Code and being overlooked by the fire marshal, and it's just widening the very entrances, all that is necessary as a condition. The fire department must cross 2 sets of tracks to get at a fire at the plant. Since the fire department is located at the QC side of the tracks, how is the fire department going to get to the Vulcan plant should a train be blocking the tracks? The fire trucks would have to cross the tracks first to get out of QC and again in front of Vulcan. If they are both blocked by a train, how is the fire going to be put out? Furthermore, because the majority of Vulcan trucks are tarpless, the thought of one of those trucks hitting a train, possibly loaded with hazmat materials, would be catastrophic, and that no one seems to be prepared for. How do we know this issue will be addressed after the CUP is granted? You have a legal right to deny this CUP, as FICO's attorneys outlined you on December 7th. We stand with our neighbor FICO, and based on all the issues and the CCS community has given you, you can just say no to Vulcan's CUP and stop the fears, concerns, and stress that it's putting on our community. You can protect the most vulnerable elderly like Mike Klimick, Lisa Moe, and many others with respiratory problems, and children's kids who play soccer so close to this potential disaster of a location. Whew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I want to say thank you if I can, okay? Thank you for allowing me tonight to speak, and CCS to speak tonight, and you people who are truly concerned as we are, simply neighbors, who really want the town of Sahuarita's Aspire Vision Plan to continue to flourish, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Thank you. Gail, and then David Roy.
Pardon me. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. Thank you for recognizing me. My name is Gail Baumgartner. I live in Rancho Sahuarita. I'm a volunteer for CCS, Concerned Citizens of Sahuarita, and have spoken to you maybe once or twice in the past about the Vulcan and the CUP. On Friday, you received a letter from Cameron Artigue. This hopefully looks familiar to everybody. Probably one of the best land use attorneys in Illinois. Arizona. I'm from Illinois, forgive me. In it, he describes a number of issues related to a CUP and the actions a town council can take and which have been upheld in courts. I urge you to read this carefully and then act on the best interest of the town and its citizens. The best part of the letter, he ends with a statement which says he will assist anyone in the town in any way in regard to this application. I urge you to take him up on that offer. Thank you for your time and wish you all a healthy and happy holiday season.
Thank you. David Roy, and then Maggie Klemick.
I would like to yield my time to someone else who hadn't signed up yet. I feel that the issue I want to talk about, which is traffic that surrounds.
Can you come? We have to come to the microphone, or it won't be recorded, even to say that.
Okay.
But we'll probably still put you on the clock since.
Okay, my name's Dave Roy, and live right here in Quail Creek. Been here for 20 years, me and my wife, and we're very concerned about the traffic that is going to be generated by if indeed the CUP is approved. Immediately, I'll just go ahead and finish this very quickly.
Yep.
Immediately, or soon thereafter the approval is given, things are going to start happening pretty quickly. And Vulcan has already said that they will be using 300 to 400 trucks to haul the hot asphalt to points of use. My question is, that many trucks coming in, 300 to 400, some of the trucks are larger than others. And I think it's going to put a heck of a crunch on intersections throughout the entire valley here, because they'll be traveling up and down the valley to get to their points of use. And that's my concern. I don't know what the next steps are. I'm certainly not going to go out and count trucks, but I may have to. But that's my concern, my wife's concern, and I thank you for your time, Mayor, and also Council, to let me bring this subject up.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Maggie, and then Michael Sandez.
Mayor, Town Council, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Maggie Klemick. I live in Quail Creek. Carl Larson asked me to share this letter on behalf of a disabled resident that could not attend. She says, "Dear Mayor and Council members, as someone who suffers from MCS/TILT, I am physically unable to attend your meetings in person. Since my body cannot easily clear toxins from pollution, whether indoor or outdoor, the prospect of the proposed Vulcan plant is incredibly stressful for me. If it were to be built, it would immediately poison me and make me very sick, and the area will be unlivable for me. I would have to leave my 90-year-old mother who lives in La Posada. I would have to sell the home I've invested in and worked hard to renovate, likely at a loss, if at all. People don't want to live in a polluted industrial zone. As my home is my major investment, I really don't know what I'll be able to afford elsewhere. I'm sending you my virtual photo as a virtual attendance at any and all meetings regarding this issue. Please count me in. And please, I beg you, vote no to the proposed Vulcan asphalt plant. It clearly will be a disaster for the whole of Sahuarita and Green Valley in so many ways. In the short term, definitely for me. In the longer term, for everyone who lives in this area. Lisa Moe of Green Valley. Mayor and Council, I'm also a concerned citizen of Sahuarita. My husband was diagnosed with a very serious lung disease while we were living in Chicago. We decided to leave our daughters and grandchildren, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But after Mike was diagnosed, we decided to move to Sahuarita for sunshine, blue skies, and most importantly, clean air. We've only been in our newly built Quail home a little over a year. I am devastated by the thought of having an asphalt plant in my backyard. I honestly don't know what we will do if this asphalt plant gets approved, or what it will do to my husband's already compromised lungs. We probably would need to move, losing our hard-earned money. The other alternative is just too difficult for me to even think about. Please don't destroy this wonderful place and the people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Michael Sandez, and then Mark Zimmerman.
Mayor, council members, thank you for allowing the opportunity for us to come and state our questions, our positions. And I also live in Quail Creek. My wife and I have been here for about a year and a half. We're happily retired, and we're enjoying the desert here coming from San Diego, though there is now a new problem called the Vulcan application for the cup. And so just a reminder of some things that have already been mentioned. You can consider evidence for and against that application. You are not restricted to just looking at the application. I'm sure you already are aware of that. The neighborhood opposition is part of this, and you can validly evaluate that as well as you consider this. Vulcan is not entitled to a CUP as a matter of right. It is not. The town council's exercise of discretion to deny the CUP is not denial of a right that Vulcan, the landowner, has. It doesn't have an automatic matter of right to that cut. A question was asked about asking yourself what conditions are necessary to mitigate land use impacts. I think the better question is, how does a hot mix asphalt plant secure for Sahuarita citizens social and economic advantages or an orderly, efficient use of land? Or how does a hot mix asphalt plant accomplish development consistent with the current and anticipated needs? Aspire 2035 makes it clear that the emphasis of the reality in Sahuarita is residence and development of dwellings. That's 84% of the land use committed already here in Sahuarita. So why was the code adopted? What's the primary purpose of the code? Reading from the code itself, as I have been already, zoning regulations were adopted for the promotion and protection of public health, peace, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare. And it doesn't end there either. And to secure for the citizens of Sahuarita the social and economic advantages of an orderly, efficient use of land. Substantially mitigate impacts. A conditional use is not a use as a matter of right. And what does substantially mitigate mean? That's a good question. There should be no special favors or privileges that can be granted to an individual property owner. Well,
I'm sure I'll see you another time.
I'll be back for more.
Thank you. Mark Zimmerman, and then Randy Langham.
Honorable Mayor Murphy, Town Council members, and town staff, my name is Mark Zimmerman, and I'm a volunteer for CCS. I'm a relatively new resident here in Sahuarita. My quick research on the Tucson Basin Aquifer, which is where we get most of our water, is as follows, and much of this information is readily available on azwater.gov. But before I get into the statistics from that site, I want to reference a story that was written in the Arizona Daily Star in September of 2020. That story states that groundwater levels are dropping 2 to 7 feet yearly in wells serving 3 companies that supply Green Valley, Sahuarita areas. Vulcan's asphalt operation will be pumping water from its well, which ties into the Tucson Aquifer. That means even more depletion of our limited water resources. The U of A Hydrology Department has stated, the thing you have to remember in this aquifer basin is this: we are pumping water that is 7,000 to 8,000 years old in many cases. And as soon as that water is gone, we don't have another ice age to replace it or reestablish it. Accepting the validity of that statement from the U of A, why would we risk this limited resource? There is a very real possibility that Vulcan's HMA plant will contaminate our ancient aquifer with chemicals. This is due to the fact that they're proposing to put this plant directly on top of our aquifer in a 65-foot deep hole. After researching AZWater.gov, you will see the maximum depth to the water, or DTW, is 1,050 feet. The minimum depth of water is minus 11 feet, which means it is above ground in some places. The average depth of the water then is 150.6 feet. The medium depth is 127.4 feet. So a plain reading under the Vulcan property, you can assume the average aquifer depth is roughly between 150 and 127 feet deep. If you subtract the 65-foot depth of the pit, and let's just use an average number of 135 feet to the depth of the water of the aquifer, that means it is just roughly 70 feet below the pit where the plant is going to be placed. You heard me right, 70 feet. And you don't need to just take my word for it. A local water company official who would like to remain anonymous for fear of losing his job has reviewed my assessment and fully concurs with my numbers and analysis. Vulcan plans no protective barrier between their chemicals and additives and all of the stuff they will spill on that pit floor, and the fact that those chemicals used in that production process have a high potential to leach through the substrate on the pit floor, will forever contaminate our ancient water source. So please protect our limited resources, protect your citizens, and please vote no on the Vulcan Cup application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. Randy Langham, and then Betty Immel.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm not going to belabor the Gamage and Burnham law firm in Phoenix. Their letter to you, you have it. I would like to say to the audience, residents, if you haven't seen this, get a copy and read it. It's available through the concerned citizens of Sahuarita. You really need to see the comments. It is made by this preeminent land use lawyer from Phoenix. The comments I do want to address to you is that I respectfully disagree with some of the implications that the town attorney has made in terms of his presentation tonight and what you may view as direction. Specifically, I'm going to talk about things on page 8, 9, and 10. And these are things that are, in my opinion, that I view as contrary to some of those viewpoints from this law firm that is retained by FICO, the pecan company, for those of you that don't know the acronym FICO. First of all, he was very good about pointing out the adverse impacts, and that includes all kinds of stuff. He talked about those things, the quality of life, traffic safety, and then there's some things in the codes, the town statutes, talk about odors and noise and this and that and the other. But he used as an example our property value. And I violently disagree with him, particularly when he uses the word evidence-based. For every expert that this company comes up with to say, here's the facts and here's what we're going to do, I can find you, and so can these people, an expert that disagrees with them and has different facts that you can base your decision on. Also, I'd like to point out to you, and I know you know this, and I know that he has advised you of this, but the town statutes and many of these issues do not have quantitative things for you to base your decision on. It is going to be, just like he said you can't do, it's going to be based on emotion and what you think. You are going to have to substantiate it in a court of law, or maybe you will. Now, the fact is, you don't have specific requirements for odor. You do not have specific requirements for noise. You talk about, well, if it's obnoxious to the local people, then they can't do that. But how are you going to measure that? I'm sorry I'm out of time. There's more, but you get the gist of it.
Yep, and you're always welcome back.
Well, I'll be back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to all.
Betty Immel, and then Alta Hughes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As Betty's coming up, I just wanted to thank you for your comments. This is in no way, I hope you don't take this as an attack in any way. I just want to remind everybody to make it easier that your comments need to be to us. If it starts going to the public, then we sometimes have to stop the opening to the public, and I don't want that to happen. So just reminding that the comments are to us, not to the audience. No, that's why I wanted to mention it now before anything got heated. You guys have been fantastic. Every time you've come, it's been a pleasure to hear from you. I would just hate for it to get negative. Sorry, Betty.
That's all right. Hi. I'm Betty Immel. I live in Madeira Highlands for 15 years now. I have to wonder why there hasn't been a draft letter from Planning and Zoning examining how they would say no instead of yes to Vulcan, and the reasons they would present. Perusing the draft, there was a mention in this permit type complied with the city's code. So essentially, in my opinion, you're saying to all of the people here who are very intelligent professionals, though retired, who've attended these meetings, that they don't comprehend what they're reading. When a number of them are retired attorneys, developers, city code managers, and the like. The council, the P&Z department are, in my opinion, treating residents of this town with disrespect and indifference to our arguments and our research. Disrespect to FICO, whose land and product will be endangered when they helped build this entire area. They have been here, the Waldens, since the 1930s. Vulcan has been here since 2015. I was here before Vulcan. As it turns out to be a mistake, then we have to wait 10 years to determine whether the conditions of approval continue substantially to mitigate the impacts. That 10 years is a long time for us to suffer. When the town accepted, this is on a different side, but when the town accepted a $5,000 check from Vulcan for the Stars and Stripes event, a number of people sensed that this was a done backroom deal. That's how many people felt. Vulcan's been here for 8 years and never contributed a penny prior to this. Now that they have a conditional use permit on the line, they coughed up $5,000. The town should have some sort of rule that does not allow people or businesses conducting current transactional pursuits with them to write checks for events. It just doesn't look ethical. And beyond that, I also agree, the FICO attorney, that our homes will drop in value, and many of us have no place else to go. We cannot simply sell our homes at a loss. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. What do I do with my...
Alta Hughes, and then Linda Beal.
What's my real...
Mayor, City Council, my name is Alta Hughes, and I'm a resident of Quail Creek. I'm going to go a little bit different direction than what everybody else is. I don't have ordinances, I don't have newspapers or anybody to back this up except for my own experience. Over the months in the City Council meetings, we have been blessed to hear the testimony from many professionals and citizen experts. All have testified in their areas of expertise about the negative impact the Vulcan plant could have on our communities. Their testimonies have been very eye-opening and compelling. But what I think has not adequately been addressed is the impact the Vulcan truck traffic will have on the entire community, and not just Quail Creek. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, but I am an expert in my life experience, and you are too. So hopefully I can raise your awareness by sharing with you my take on living with Vulcan in our community. My take is not based on emotion. It's not exaggerated. It's based on my experience, and basically it is what it is. Who would have thought a hot asphalt plant was in the works? With the approval of the Vulcan Cup, everything that is will change, but not in a good way. Let's visualize what this might look like. Let's begin with empty trucks or trucks hauling materials into and out of the plant. Obviously, 250 to 450 trucks a day will impact our everyday lives. And it's been estimated, someone here estimated that was about a truck entering and leaving the pit every 6 minutes. What routes will the trucks use to access the plant or the freeway? Regardless of the route, we all know congestion will be a big factor. 250 to 450 trucks daily will affect our roads. Traffic will back up and will result in air and noise pollution at the very least. Here's where I want you to be the expert. Have you ever followed an asphalt truck? I have, and it's not pleasant. There will be many instances in your daily life where you will be accosted by the smell of asphalt, going to the store, the doctor's, picking your kids up at school. How about your kids playing soccer at the QC Veteran Park? Trucks will be frequently passing, and it could be every 6 minutes. In of itself, the smell of asphalt won't kill you, but it will certainly affect the quality of your everyday life. Every day the plant is in operation. The city's website proudly proclaims in big bold letters, Sahuarita, you'll love it here. City council members, don't let Vulcan tarnish the quality of our lives. Deny the application, or do you want Vulcan to be your legacy?
Thank you. Lee Staub, and then Lisa Larkin. Lee Staub? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. I'm getting ahead of myself. Linda Beal, then Lee Staub, then Lisa.
Perhaps you really don't want to hear what
No, I just turned it over too quickly.
Okay. Mayor Murphy, council, staff. I'm Linda Beal, a resident of Quill Creek. Vulcan should not be granted a CUP. But on the chance we are doomed to this lapse in common sense, I am looking for adequate conditions to be mandated for our protection. The present draft has 3 columns: the conditions, the rationale, and the source. The source column shows that the staff has had input on numerous conditions that are riddled with loopholes. These allow Vulcan to add previously absent pollutants to the air, to go without reasonable and appropriate monitoring, to have no specifics for measurable standards, to misuse or eliminate the town's existing code and procedures, to make as much noise, pollution, and stink as they want, and to operate 24/7. The last condition, number 30 on the draft, is contributed only by staff. It says that Vulcan CUP can be reevaluated any time, except before 10 years have passed. In other words, if the approved mitigations for potential hazards and nuisance are not working, we can't get them changed for 10 years. Not even if conditions change during that 10 years. Worse, they remove part of the existing code, which says Vulcan keeps its CUP only if it sticks to the conditions. I object strongly to condition 30. The existing code is just fine, and it does not allow an automatic 10 years of whatever Vulcan dishes out. I was not only discouraged, but furious that the staff is offering this to Vulcan. It shows me either blunt stupidity or corruption in favor of Vulcan. We need to pay attention to this. I do not believe that the town has to give Vulcan the right to operate without meaningful and effective restrictions and conditions on their negative impacts. The potential conditions draft needs a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Staub, and then Lisa Larkin.
Mayor and City Council, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here tonight. First of all, thank you for serving the public. I know that that's a difficult job. I wouldn't want to sit up here for the last 11 months. I was saddened to hear the fact that this may take 6 or 7 more months. It's been a very long process, and countless people that are sitting in this audience tonight have given thousands of their hours and their personal time and treasure in order to assist the mayor and the city council and also the staff in making the right decision and recommendations. As you all recall, you probably recall, I'm a retired military officer. And while I was on active duty, I was responsible for the lives of the servicemen and women and their families. Although I couldn't promise always to bring everyone home, I could make one promise, that I wouldn't leave anybody behind. What I ask is that you don't leave anybody behind. As elected officials, you have a responsibility for the health, safety, and quality of life for the people that's living in your community. Every one of these folks that are sitting here tonight chose to live here. Could have lived anywhere else in the United States, but they chose to live here. They devoted countless hours of their own time in helping you to make the right decision. They've all put their lives on hold for the last 10 or 11 months, and they'll continue to do so until this finally comes up for a vote. And I will tell you, I've served with a lot of people that I admire on active duty, but I'm honored to serve with some of the folks who have given their lives to this community for the last almost year. While I was a commander, I received input and guidance from many people who weren't overseas. I was told how to conduct combat operations. I was told how to do this and how to spend money and how to protect lives. But you know what? None of those people ever had to make that decision. Only I had to make that decision. And I was responsible solely for the decision that I was going to make, regardless of how many lawyers and other people told me what I should do or what I couldn't do. I solely was responsible for making that decision. The decisions were mine, and I accepted that responsibility as a leader. You have the responsibility to make the right decision. All your consultants, all your lawyers, and all your staff, and your planning commission is not going to make the decision. Only you will. And I ask that you make the right decision. You've been told tonight what you should and shouldn't consider. You've been told what substantially means. You've been told that almost all lives matter, but maybe some of the people will be affected by the air quality, but we can't protect everybody. Yes, you can. We need to make the right decision here to protect all those people who elected you and put you in office. So please don't leave anybody behind. Protect us all. Protect our hometown. Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Lisa Larkin, and then Stuart Lisk.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm addressing you directly, not the audience. My name is Lisa Larkin. I'm a resident of Rancho Sahuarita. I'm a realtor. I own a real estate company, and I'm a lawyer. I wasn't intending to speak this evening until I heard the town lawyer talk about data relating to property values. And I did have a conversation at one point with the town manager about the same issue. And I really do understand that a lot of things affect property value, but let's just have some common sense here. You know, if there's something bad near a property, it is going to affect the value. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Value is determined by supply and demand. And when the supply goes up and the demand goes down, then the property value is going to go down. Now, maybe I shouldn't be complaining because I've already had neighbors tell me that they plan to call me if this cup gets approved because they plan to move. And I guess I could make a lot of money helping them do that. But I want to live here. I like it here. I went to law school with Bob Sharp. I wonder if he'd be rolling over in his grave right now if he knew what we were considering to pollute his town. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart?
Good evening, Town Council, Mr. Mayor, staff. I'm actually here to discuss a few things or mention a few things. One, I want to give you a big thank you for the left turn signal over on the extension. Yes, that has been terrific. The other thing I would ask, though, is since the traffic light over in front of Quail Creek, that intersection, is hopefully going to go in within the next quarter, I'd ask you to please think ahead for those striped turn lines like we talked about, because I think that also will help, so people don't go right into that right-hand lane, and hopefully that would also decrease traffic as well as you head in. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, and of course, as always, everyone here has talked eloquently about the asphalt plant, so I'm not going to add anything else to it, but again, thank you for that left turn signal.
Thank you, Stuart. That's all the speaker cards I had. Was there anybody else? Yeah, just make sure if you do come to fill out one of the cards and give it to Lisa before you go. Thanks.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Happy Hanukkah too.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Town Council. I'm here to talk about something totally different. I'm here to address the entrance of Walden Grove. My daughter will be driving soon. I have 2 other daughters that will be entering Walden Grove in a few years. Obviously, I worry about my child driving anywhere, but especially going to school every day. That intersection has no light. I personally have seen an accident happen. If you've ever been on your way into Walden Grove, you know that line can be really long, so much so that I've been in line 15 minutes waiting in that line just to get in. I've seen students speed past me and do a U-turn at the next one, and that's where I actually saw the accident. A student U-turn, tried to come in, and another student T-boned them. So I'm asking you to consider putting a light up, something that would have a no turn on red on the opposite side, so anybody that does do that U-turn is gonna have to wait for this long line to turn into Walden Grove before they can do that. I implore you to do it not only for the inconvenience that that causes. I know the other day, I leave about 20 minutes early. We still are late. And I know people say leave earlier. It's kind of hard when I have, several things on my plate, other kids that I have to get to school. So for me, obviously, the convenience-wise, it has to be a disruption when 25 students are waiting to get into the school, and those 25 students are going to be going to different classes 15 minutes late. But if we take that aside, it's the safety. We have to really think about those kids maybe not making the best decision. They're going to be late, they're going to do that U-turn, they're rushing to get into the school. So I feel if we can help them in any way make better choices, or at least put something that's going to deter them from making that U-turn and make it easier for the parents that are waiting in line and not U-turning, I implore you to do that, and I know it will take a lot of stress off me, at least for that morning when she heads to school. So thank you for hearing me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Crystal Soto.
Thank you.
Thanks. And just, if you can, fill out one of those. It's in that back left-hand corner there, and then just give it to Lisa.
Mr. Mayor. Staff, could we take a look at that? Thank you.
Yep.
It's been addressed before, so she'll be able to.
And get us an update.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, just make sure you fill out a
Yeah,
speaker.
I know the drill, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. My name is John O'Rourke. I live in Quail Creek. I've lived there just almost 10 years now. I'm also on the board of directors for Quail Creek's HOA. I wasn't planning on speaking this evening, but I want to let you know that recently I pulled up a financial analyst report on Vulcan. Wanted to learn more about this company. What were their strengths? What were their weaknesses? You know what the financial analyst said was their number one strength? Getting permits. Their major strength is getting permits. This is what we are up against. So we talk about mitigating the hazards, mitigating the adverse impacts. They're good at this. They are going to tell you what you want to hear to get the permit through. This is what we're up against. But once they do get a permit through, heaven forbid, what happens then? I had a professor back a long time ago who was fond of saying, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Zebra can't change its stripes, right? We've all heard that. And month after month, you all have heard from experts and so on about Vulcan's track record. We all have heard about the problems with these hot mix plants. Past performance is the best predictor of what will happen in the town of Sahuarita if this is approved. We're up against a good company here. I don't want to demonize these guys. This is a good company. This is a well-run company. They're just in a lousy business. They're in a business that's harmful to people, harmful to the environment, harmful to communities in which they operate. They're very clever. Their strength is getting permits through. They'll substantially mitigate what you want to hear. So I ask you, please be careful, because these folks are clever. Past behavior is the best predictor of the future. We don't want that in our town. Thank you. I thank you for your month after month, your patience with us. I mean, God love you. You know, I don't know that I have the patience. I don't know that I've had the patience to sit there and listen to us the way you do. And I want to thank you for it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to speak before I close the call to the public? Seeing no movement, I'll close the call to the public. And I did want to just respond on just a couple of points. You know, we do have a very professional staff who are working very, very, very hard on preparing this and working through the process, as you heard earlier. So I just wanted to give kudos to all the hard work that's gone into the staff. Thank you. Now we come, well, do you want to take like a 5-minute break? I usually break at 8, but before we get into the other stuff. Thanks. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah. Next time I'll do that. Well, welcome back. The audience has thinned out a little bit, as I see. Now we come to council, town manager, brief summary of events, current events. Bill, Simon, Debbie, Diane, Doctor.
Winterfest was fantastic, but I think you prepared something, but it was great to be there.
Thank
I love
you.
the button they have you flip
Yes.
and turn the lights.
And it really worked.
And the drone show and the fireworks, everybody loved it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was going to comment on that, but all to the same comments. Park and Rec, I know, put a lot of effort, not only in that event, all events. And as you all know, at the end of the year, it gets really hot and heavy, October and November, in December. And I also wanted to thank Wrights and Ridge for allowing the parade to amass there before they came down Rancho Sahuarita Boulevard. And also, obviously the PD and the Rangers and the VIPs, everybody that helped out on that. And I did want to give a shout out to Maddie Comstock. I don't know if you saw the article. She's on her journey to becoming an Eagle Scout. And the additional flags for the holidays I think it's from the Armed Forces Park within Rancho Sahuarita down to the intersection at La Villita. Her project was installing 15 flagpole bases and 26 more flagpoles, which brings us over to about, I think it's 204 American flags that they put out. And I know I saw John Garcia from our streets department down taking them down on Sunday, I think it was, out there. So, and he was one of the finalists for the Governor's Arts Award for that and for other projects. So just wanted to give a shout out. And, let's keep these Eagle Scout projects coming along. I think we started with about 40 or 45 originally, and now we're over 200, and I get more comments about that. One of the state senators was driving through and commented on that when he was down for a meeting, so thanks on that. And I have down Mr. Dilly, who looks a little interesting tonight, so Beth, as the Assistant Town Manager, if you'd like to give a little update.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a slight correction. It's 214.
Oh, 14,
flags that
okay.
we have now, correct. And about 7 years ago, we had about 50.
Wow.
So yes, we
Pretty
have
amazing.
significantly expanded that program almost completely through Eagle Scout projects.
Right.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Just one thing that just came to mind. Saturday, 10 o'clock at most of the cemeteries in the area, we're putting wreaths across America.
Oh.
So we'll be at the Green Valley Cemetery. We've got a contingency from Post 131 going down to Tubac and to Rio Rico.
Nice. Yeah, I've read about that.
They're coming in on Wednesday.
That organization, put Wreaths Across America. And I think actually Park and Rec has a eggnog 5K this Saturday as well. Eggnog Trot, I think it's called. Yep, absolutely. So a couple of different events we can do on Saturday. I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
And the other thing that I was going to offer is that if you're available at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, please join staff and the Sahuarita Optimistic Squad for the holiday breakfast.
Thank you.
In council chambers.
And I did forget, Stack had their winter social. I was able to judge the ugly sweater contest. And it was really tough because most of them all wore very nice Christmas sweaters. So I was happy about that, but it was hard to have the ugly sweater when there weren't too many ugly sweaters on there. And as a reminder, January 22nd is our next council meeting, and wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year before we come back, which moves us to item number 8, which is the consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved unanimously. And we move to item number 9, Madam Clerk.
Discussion and possible adoption of ordinance 2023-172, amending Title 15, Buildings and Construction, Chapter 15.05, Building Codes, Section 1505.020, Building Codes adopted of the Sahuarita Town Code to reflect the adoption of Appendix Q, tiny houses, to the 2018 International Residential Code, and repealing all resolutions, ordinance, and rules of the town of Sahuarita in conflict therewith.
Thank you, and as you can see, Ann is really busy tonight. She's going to be presenting this along with Bill Lahr, our building official. Good evening to the both of you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. Tonight we are here to talk to you about adoption of the Tiny Houses Appendix to the Building Code. As you all recall, a couple of months ago, we brought forth a zoning code text amendment to allow tiny houses with certain conditions, and that was a part of our workforce housing strategy, which stemmed from the housing study that we did, which has probably been a good 4 years ago now. So this is a checklist item essentially from that workforce housing strategy to help bring more variety in housing prices into the town. As part of that zoning code amendment that we did a couple of months ago, like I said, we allowed for tiny houses. Unfortunately, the IRC, the International Residential Code, has certain criteria in it, and Bill will get into those specifics, that don't allow for tiny houses. So in order for those to actually happen, this building code amendment is required. So I will pass the mic over to Bill now.
Thank you. Mayor Murphy and the council, appreciate the time to go forth and explain a little bit about the IRC and the 2018 adopted code that we are under currently. They are the minimum standards for single and dual residents, and they pertain to full-size houses, SFRs, and without the amendments of Appendix Q, that pertains to houses that are under 400 square feet and have a foundation. So with one and two family dwellings that the International Residential Code covers, they require minimum room size for full-size dwellings, minimum window sizes, mechanical ventilation systems, minimum ceiling heights, and minimum stairway dimensions. With Appendix Q, the IRC has it regulates the tiny houses, and it gives them not as strict parameters, so the design can be associated with a tiny home. They lay out a minimum for building standards that pay special attention to specific features such as compact stairs, railings, ladders, reduced ceiling heights, lofts, emergency escape and rescue openings, and so forth. The recommendation for Appendix Q is we would be following the City of Tucson has adopted it already, and also Pima County they have both adopted it. And with just the amendment of the ceiling heights for which the rooms with slope ceilings with at least 50% of the floor area of the room must have a ceiling height of 6 foot 8 inches, and no portion of the floor area of the room to have ceiling height less than 5 feet. So we would be mimicking the amendment that they put through and adopting the Appendix Q as they did. So with that, I move to adopt ordinance number 2023-172 172. Got that right?
Well, that would be more of a suggestion, because that's what we have to do.
Okay.
Is move.
You're working our side of the street.
But that's okay.
I
You-
apologize.
You'll take a pay deduction if you're coming up here on there. But, and I guess I would assume that if we don't do this, that we'll have a house of glass, so to speak, if we're trying to comply with much bigger structures.
We'll give you a house with a 4-foot ceiling.
There you go. That would be fine. Any questions? If not, we'll ignore that motion, but take that suggestion and see if someone would like to make that motion for me.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I move to adopt ordinance number 2023-172 as suggested.
Second. That wasn't Bill who seconded that, right? That Bill. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for being here. Madam Clerk, item number 10.
Presentation and discussion regarding the Victim Services webpage.
Thank you. And Chief Nolan will be giving this presentation. And as a reminder, a couple of these next ones are for presentation only.
Click the down button to advance it.
Thank you for the tip, Anna. I'd have gone the opposite way. I've been looking for something to go left and right. Correct. Council members, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give you an update on where we are with some advances for our Victim Services webpage and management on how we are addressing some of our issues. You'll see that we've got a draft right now that we're working on that's not in front of you this evening, I don't believe, connected to our webpage, but I can tell you what will be included in the webpage. So it'll include all the elements of our updated Victim Services trifold. That's a paper document we hand out to victims of all types. Somebody that has been a victim of something such as vandalism, petty theft, residential burglary, or more serious crimes such as aggravated assault, sexual assault, things of that nature. So it clearly spans the entire different groups of different types of crimes, misdemeanors and felonies. It'll explain how to contact the police department, different portions of the police department, and how town departments and a variety of organizations which may be able to provide different types of resources to victims of crimes. It'll touch on that. Counseling, restitution, understanding of the justice system, which is really quite complex, the different processes in the justice system, as well as some of our town processes, such as roadside memorials, etc. Understanding common timelines associated with police department investigations. Some go very fast, and other ones are very, very long. It just depends. Court processes, and then what may or may not be able to be shared by a particular type of investigation or incident. So once they become a public document past a draft stage, etc., clearly a lot of that, almost all of that is releasable. But there are some other connections to not wanting to jeopardize a case or an investigation, so sometimes they're held just a little bit longer. Additionally, our victim rights trifold, which I just mentioned in the last slide, we've completely updated that. I think you have a draft in front of you this evening.
We did. It looks very comprehensive. Appreciate that.
Thank you. It falls in line with all state laws right now and what we're required to do, and then quite frankly adds a little bit more on top of that. And you'll now see, I believe it's outlined by perhaps a yellow box on your drafts. That'll be a QR code. It'll be located on 2 different places of the document. And the idea behind that is they can scan that QR code, save that as necessary, and yes, keep the paper copy, which comes in handy, trying to find your case number and things of that nature, but also have it at your, or on your smartphone, which a lot of people carry with them pretty much all the time. So this will be provided to all victims of all different types of crimes.
And it's designed really to help them understand their rights, who they can contact, things of that nature. And I think that covers all of our processes right now. The web page, we're still working on some fine tuning on that, but I believe anything you find on that trifold will somehow be designed into the web page, as well as for those more significant cases when perhaps we're dealing with the loss of a person, a homicide, a fatal traffic collision, et cetera. There'll be an avenue for them that will be clearly visible to folks to go to when the timing is right for their family, friends, et cetera, to be able to go and get additional information.
Thanks, Chief. And I saw the trifold and what a good job it was. And also, haven't we, for some of those more serious cases, actually someone from PD is focusing separately on the victim as opposed to the case itself? That was a new thing that I know
Yes.
you were working on as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we call it a coordinator. So on those cases where it's reasonably expected that people will not be familiar with the process, so a homicide, fatal traffic collision, a significant crime, we will assign a follow-up coordinator to the victim or victim's family, depending on what type of victim they are, so they can get through the process. And we've utilized that once here recently, where we had that person assigned to the case, and then that coordinator connected them with other town department employees that have the expertise in different areas to help them through a process.
Right, because this is a different sort of a mental process on solving a crime or investigating a crime as opposed to being a victim advocate and supporter that has a little different focus on it, correct?
Correct, and sometimes it's really about resources. So your traditional victim services advocate is going to be through the Pima County Attorney's Office, who has funding for that, et
Right.
cetera. And we've connected our victims with that through our coordinator. So we've used them since we sort of came up with this concept, probably 5, 6, maybe 7 times now.
Right.
And it's been beneficial for us. So.
Right, thank you. Debbie?
Thank you, Mayor. Are we utilizing the victim witness program as on-site when the crime happens? Or are we just referring them the next day?
Council member, thank you. We try to call them out when it hits a qualifying type of incident. So a homicide would be a qualifying incident. The more serious domestic violence incidents would be a qualifying incident. So we do make direct contact when the officers are still at the scene and conducting the investigation to contact victim services through the county to have them respond with a victim advocate to the scene to walk them through the process. There have been times where we've called and they've been so busy they didn't have anybody. We do a follow-up with them to make sure, when it's actually the advocate's job now to do it, but we work to have a follow-up contact the very next morning. We ran into one of these recently, and we were surprised, unfortunately, that they couldn't respond that evening. That was explained to the victim. They understood it, and then County Victim Services went out and contacted that same person the very next day. So within 24 hours.
Do the fatality car accidents qualify for that? Because the one that comes to mind with me is Gabriel Ayala when he came because his son was in a fatality.
Correct.
And there were no services for him. You know, to me, I think that what you're doing is great, but a trifold to a victim, they don't want that. They want a hug. They want somebody that's going to listen to them. They want a shoulder to cry on.
Yep. So we would contact victim services for anything that qualifies, and I believe that would be a qualifying
Okay.
event.
Thank you.
Yep. We try to put a person behind it.
Any other questions? Yeah, Diane?
So in follow-up, Deb, when there was that fatal act, the things
there you
that
go.
I had asked for was that the website be updated so that it was easy to find the updated rules for roadside memorials, and also to link it to being able to plant a memorial tree in honor of a victim of a crime. And I'd like to know whether that's been accomplished as part of this website update.
We're in the process right now. The draft has come to me. I think there's some small fine tuning we still need to do on the website. We did have, unfortunately, a fatal incident, a traffic collision here recently. We coordinated with that person, the surviving family member, and had them connect with Paul Burton. That process works very well, so that was an actual person. But our goal is to have that information done in a very professional, caring way on the website. It's one thing if you're a victim of, I lost my $300 bicycle, or I just lost a family member.
Right.
And so we're fine tuning that, and Haley, I think, was in the back.
Yeah, I think
a little
Haley's,
while ago.
she's coming up next, so
Was-
maybe
was
she
assisting.
can touch on that as well
Yep.
as part of the overall website update.
Yep, so that's in the works right now and very close, I believe, but I'll let Haley tell you.
Yep. Mhm. Thanks. Any other questions for the chief? Nope. Thanks, chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 11.
Presentation and discussion regarding the updates to the town website.
Thank you. And Haley Tavoyan is our Public Information Officer and will present this item. I always call her Haley. I've never used her last name, hardly ever. And
Yes, it's my husband's Armenian, so if you feel like you're saying every single vowel, you're probably saying it correctly.
okay.
Oyen, yeah. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's delightful to be here with you today. I'm happy to address your question first, Councilmember Priolo, if you'd like. You were asking about policy changes to, or making roadside memorials more visible on the website, is that right?
Yeah.
When I searched the website, I couldn't find it at all. So I asked for it to be easily breadcrumbed,
Okay.
and then put it in conjunction with the tree memorial, because they both are in a similar vein, how to honor a loved one who's
Sure.
lost their life.
Sure, yeah. So we've had many conversations about this. Beth may be able to speak specifically to the policy. There was some discussion with PD and Beth that I was privy to, but was sort of tangentially involved in the policy and making the language really more clear. So she can probably provide more specific updates as to that. But as far as its visibility on the website, I think it's one of the primary features of the victim services area is to make clear what that memorial process could look like. So yes, it is noted, and I think will be a part of that that primary architecture.
Thanks.
Beth, did you want to say anything else? I'm not sure about the tree program, so I'm not sure where that ended up.
So actually, we did update the roadside memorial policy. We did make it a lot clearer and addressed a lot of the whys in the policy. It wasn't just a because we said so policy, so people understood the challenges of just placing items within the road and why that could create a hazard in itself. The policy actually does reference other memorial policies, such as the tree planting at the very end and where to find that information, in addition to being able to find the memorial policy through the Victim Services webpage. You can also find it via the Public Works webpage as well. So there's multiple locations, so if you're not really kind of sure how to get there from here, there's a couple different ways to get there from here for somebody who might know that this is a Public Works charge and is just looking there directly.
If you search in the search bar, does it come up easily?
I would have to check that.
Could you do
The
that?
search-
Maybe Haley can
Yeah.
touch on that one.
The search function leaves much to be desired, is my professional opinion. But it does lead lovely into what I'll show today, because I think we're going to make some really quality improvements on the website that will make searchability a little bit easier. And then we'll have hopefully more landing pages. So for that means that a QR code will take you exactly where you need to be. So in some of the pieces that Chief was mentioning, a QR code would take a person right to the memorial page versus them having to do any searching. So we're hoping to mitigate that by providing that as part of the resources that Chief mentioned.
Yeah, the QR code I like because people are getting more used to those. And when you hit on that with your phone, which everybody has,
Yep.
to go right to it,
Yep.
I think that's a really cool feature. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming you'll be building some of those things
Yeah.
in. But no, talking to you on this, this is a much more complicated project than I think a lot of us would realize when you're having to recreate all this backdoor architecture, and it's not just going in, doing a couple of things, and all of a sudden everything's
Yeah.
easier, correct?
Yes, thank you for that acknowledgement. It is a lot more, back-end heavy than you would think. We actually had something like 2,500 pages when I arrived here in April. So due to a lot of the work of each of our departments, we have cleaned house a bit. There's a lot of just sort of draft pages that were underway that we were able to clear out, a lot of documents that were out of date that needed to be deleted. They weren't linked to anywhere, but they still existed on the site.
But you
And
knew the
that's-
mission was dangerous when you took it.
I did. I was fully aware, yeah. And I knew that I was doubling the communication team when I arrived. So I was, and I have a very good support in Dustin Sinclair, who's the web guy and has been on his own for a bit. So I'll jump in here. We've got, let me see. Am I connected to the? Yeah. Am I going
Maybe
the wrong
just keep
direction? Oh, that's why. There we go. There I am. Okay. So I'm with the Department of Economic Development and Public Affairs. I report to Victor Gonzalez through the town manager's office. And when I arrived here in April of this year, it's as public information officer, really tried to hit the ground running really quickly. The website really floated to the top as something that absolutely needed immediate attention. For reference, the website was last revised in 2016. So I think that was the last time there was a really consistent communication team, and it has since changed teams a couple times and lots of organizational change. And so it is reasonable that it hasn't happened until sort of this team is being formed now. That said, when it was done in 2016, it was done very well. It was also done by the standards of the World Wide Web in 2016. And as you see every single day, the user experience changes, the technology improves. Sometimes it changes for the better. Sometimes we have to adapt to trends that we think are sort of ridiculous, but that's the way people are using the web right now. QR codes, as an example, they were a flash in the pan. Nobody paid attention to them. Now with the pandemic, people wanted to go paperless as much as possible. Now you're ordering on your phone. People don't even provide you menus anymore at a restaurant, right? So the reemergence of the QR code is a great example of a way in which a trend that we sort of thought was going to go away ended up coming back in a big way. So best practice is to revise your website with a pretty comprehensive redesign every 2 to 5 years. And it's so standard that our website provider actually builds that redesign into the cost of our contract. So the redesign process does not cost the town anything unless we should want to upgrade certain elements like searchability to be able to improve the user experience. So far, website redesign is at no cost to us. We have employed Gordley Group for some design work, but with that exception, all the work's been done in-house, and I think it's pretty exciting so far. Let me see if I can go the right way. Here we go. So the first few weeks, I realized I needed to know more about the website and where it currently stood and what the current uses were in order for us to move forward effectively. So my primary questions, categories were: one, what's the user experience like? So for the resident, for the business owner, those people that are using our website, what's their experience? And then I also wanted to understand the back-end experience. So what bells or what hoops were our staff having to jump through to get their content onto the website? I also needed to assess Civic Plus as a web provider. They're very cost-effective, and so far I have no major complaints, but Web providers are a dime a dozen right now. You can go with a number of price points and get a fairly similar outcome. So what I think is unique about Civic Plus is how many other municipalities they work with. That gives us a good comparison, one-to-one, with other municipalities of our size, so we can look at their metrics and our metrics, and because we're all operating in the same system, we understand a little bit more where we stand, where we have room to improve. So armed with that data, I also wanted to take a closer look at our individual audience groups. So I wanted to know who's coming to our website, what barriers are they facing when they come to the site, and what improvements are desired. That can come to us from things like a bounce rate that tells us how quickly people come in and then quickly leave, how long people spend time on the page, and other things like that. And then the provider capabilities, I think mostly for me, I just wanted to update the creative to look a little bit more fresh, a little bit easier to navigate, and really showcase the beauty of Sahuarita with images of Sahuarita versus a lot of heavy text and color. So what you'll see here, this is what the website looks like today. A beautiful image, but it is cropped, so I'm not clear what those trees are. Because I live here, I know that's the pecan groves, right? But we have found that images like drone shots really speak to the vibrancy of the community, the fantastic skyline that you see behind you, all of those features that really give the wow factor of Sahuarita weren't coming through for me quite as clearly on photography. So that's a big push for us this year. Is Dustin Sinclair is going to be in your face a lot with photos and out at events and things like that. The color blocking is also very heavy, so it suggests a bit of a heavy, using heavy on top of heavy, but the tone isn't quite as light and airy as one would hope for to be able to navigate the different sections with ease. There's also a little bit of mystery surrounding the variations of the Sahuarita mark. So this one that you see in the top left, this is a secondary mark that was created in, I think, 2016 for use as a kind of a decal and things like that, but I found that in some places it was used as the primary mark. There are some accessibility issues with it, as well as with the bouncing letters of Sahuarita. And this was showed to the council earlier this year, the comparison between sort of what we've done with the mark. We took a little bit of that bounce out of the letters, and thus a screen reader is going to be able to pick it up for a person that is visually impaired. So in the absence of alt text, we can supplement with a little bit more readability for the visually impaired user. So some changes like that were necessary because they were best practice, and we're going to improve the quality of the user experience. But also, a lot of it was aesthetic choice to show the community that we're moving forward in a little bit more sophisticated direction. I really like the bouncing letters for things like tourism and parks that have that vibrancy and movement and life in it. But I found, especially with working with Chief on the memorial things, that sometimes those bouncing letters communicate a little bit of whimsy that we'd like to pull away from the content because we want it to be grounded and to be a little bit more mature. So this variation, I think, will help us a lot in doing that. So the functionality concerns with the website, we wanted to be able to leverage what the users are currently accessing the website for. So first, we're valued as a hub for local services. People want to be able to come to us first, and from there, find a job. From there, find their grocery store. From there, learn about their school district. So if we can leverage that opportunity with the town and be an entry point, we're not only going to serve our population, but we're going to serve our many partners in the community. Users were also pretty confused by the navigation. So the drop-down menus had a lot of jargon. A lot of terms that we use day to day are not familiar to your average user. The average website user has a 6th grade reading level. So really looking at the website across the board to make sure that we're using lay terms that everyone can identify with And that also we're demonstrating a sense of pride in the town and in joy, even in what we're saying, or seriousness when that's relevant as well, but doing so in terms people understand. The next thing is something that Councilmember Prillo discussed, which was how do you find things when you need to know right where to go? So landing pages are a great way to do that. So it's a landing page is a singular page intended to receive a user. So from whatever channel they're currently on, they're reading the bifold on the memorial brochure, the QR code will take them directly to a page that serves that specific person in that specific circumstance. These pages can end up adding to our overall page count, but ultimately they're getting us sort of a funnel for that user to be able to come in on their terms and then maybe access the rest of the site with a little less confusion up front. Lastly, we know users really want project news and regular updates. Vulcan is a good example of a place where I don't think that we could provide too much information to the public. I think they would consume everything we were willing to write. So having more information comprehensively about what's our current update on Vulcan, and let's update that weekly. Anna does a great job of sending out project updates that we see internally, and I think are also available to the public. But are we making that visible to the person who just comes to the website looking for news and information, and they find that first and foremost? So for clarity and visuals, like I spoke about earlier, we really want to leverage white space as well as regional photography. This will give it a little bit more breathing room and help people to not feel like that cluttered, heavy feeling that I've heard describe the website before. Also using brevity and then live text. So when a staff member uploads a PDF document, that PDF by the web standards is an image. So if this is an image that contains pages and pages of policy, for instance, there's no way for a visually impaired person who's using a screen reader to be able to actually read that information. So where possible, rather than uploading PDFs that have a timestamp and are not able to be adapted as needed, we want to build live text pages that are not only accessible, but then we can update with more regularity versus having to re-upload and replace the time-stamped PDF. The logo variation that I discussed takes out a bit of that bounce. It also moves from the red color to a Sonoran wine. So it softens the red into a little bit darker, one of those shades you see at the very base there, a little bit more purple. It's a softer feeling for the eye, less fast food, more winery in tone. And we also created some variations so that departments can have a sense of identity in their mark as well. So where Town of Sahuarita and a department header need to exist simultaneously, we don't have to stack logo. We have Town of Sahuarita Public Works, Town of Sahuarita Town Council. So those kinds of variations I think will help overall for things to feel more cohesive. So where we are today, we've accomplished quite a bit, although it's all been on the back end. So the website still looks the way that it does, that it did 9 months ago when I arrived, but a lot has been accomplished. We've decided to stick with Civic Plus. I learned that we have over 30 third-party programs that are currently plugged into Civic Plus. So these are things like a single sign-on to apply for a job, or a portal to submit a complaint for a street repair, need for a street repair, or to register for an event. So while we kind of get our arms around all those different systems and look for ways to possibly cross over and reduce that number, it seemed unwise to pull out that linchpin, which was the central source in Civic Plus as the website. I think they're great, fine. Like I said, I think we could go with a number of web providers, but it did seem like the wrong time to make a different choice now. So we're going to complete the redesign process since it is free to us, and we'll see how things come together. Really take the opportunity to eliminate those extra pages, rewrite some content, improve the visuals, and then this time next year, we're hopefully going to have some user data to tell us what are the gaps still missing for users, and do we think that the user would be better served on another platform. Then we'll be moving over all that beautiful content versus kind of trying to make sense of it as we're moving it. So we have design elements that have been adapted for accessibility, and we also have developed a website layout. So right now, we just approved the website map, and currently mapping out a user journey. And if this sounds like a lot of jargon, I'm happy to provide more detail, but essentially we identified the primary users for the website. So the resident, the business owner, there are others, I think there are 6 primary users, and we're mapping out what they might come to us needing, where we would want them to start, and which steps we would want them to take, and that spans out over all the pages that exist now. So it's kind of like a spider's web that we built. And then we look for crossover opportunity as well. So currently underway are website mockups and design implementation. So we'll be able to show something very soon. I have a mockup to share with you today that is just creative, that we had support from our friends at Gordley Group help us to produce. So this is what we hope it will look like. Whether Civic Plus can make it happen exactly is going to be, we'll have to see. But I'll be able to show you that shortly. We're also going to take a look at photography, do a big overhaul this year, and then begin that development for the content. So my team will prioritize the top 25 performing pages, which see thousands of views, and then anything that falls below 200 views in a year, we're going to put back to the individual departments to revise that content, and then we'll review for copy editing and all of that. But we'll really be prioritizing those top traffic pages first. So this is what we're hopeful the website can come together and look like. You'll see, do I have a laser here? I think I do. Oh, there we go. That's kind of cute.
Our new screens.
So that mark up there is the revised mark that you all saw earlier this year. Not vastly different, still really honors, I think, the energy of the original mark, but like I said, having that center through line gives it just a bit more maturity. This iconography will be used throughout the site, so it's a single color with multiple hues to demonstrate various things versus having it be a lot of color and a lot of variation. And then again, having the opportunity to take a look at that top level navigation. The blue line is really our key audiences. We want them to have a place to start. So each of those will be a brand new page that then helps them sort through their needs at that point. This is the next level down. So as you scroll, you would then see the local events calendar, which will reflect not just town council events, but all events in the Parks and Recreation Department and others. And Parks and Recreation has done a fantastic job of curating a community calendar that anyone in Sahuarita, I believe, can contribute to. Is that right, Devin? They just have to submit a request. So any business or entity in Sahuarita can submit that. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we're going to take a feed from Parks and integrate it with our own events. So as far as the user is concerned, they're going to see a comprehensive look at all events happening in Sahuarita. We know on the back end it's a little bit to do, but we think will ultimately serve the population better. The next section is key services. So Parks and Recreation, access to a staff directory, safety, and then permits and planning will be among the primary pockets that serve users based on the metrics that we have had a chance to look at. And then the bottom, we're still revising the creative along the bottom, but we're hoping to have some images that reflect Sahuarita, so possibly mountains. We've got the trees here, obviously, but a dual tone color footer that brings a little bit of life there to the bottom. We'll also have a dual news feed for town updates and town projects. So one of those feeds will be police-related news, and one of those feeds will be all other town news, because we know the frequency with which police updates the media releases is a lot. So we want to make sure that we have sort of a balanced idea of what's top of mind. So this is the project timeline currently. Like I said, we're in content development and mock-up stage right now. Really hopeful that we can have something to show you within the next month or two in terms of mock-ups, and then we'd love to go live as early as March. That's me being very hopeful, but I think we can make it happen. And like I said, most of the work's invisible right now, but it'll be really exciting when it comes together. So, are there any questions?
Thank you. No, great presentation.
sorry, I
I know a
didn't-
lot of work's been going into it, and like a lot of things, all the back end stuff has to get all finished before we go.
That's
Any questions, comments? Right on the right track? Good. Thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate
I'll
it.
take it. Thanks.
Madam Clerk, item number 12.
Discussion and possible approval of contract number 240046 with PCL Construction Incorporated for construction manager at risk, CMAR Construction Services for the Sahuarita Water Reclamation Facility re-rating implementation project in an amount not to exceed $6,985,377 and approval of a $2,400,000 interfund loan between the general fund and wastewater enterprise fund.
Thank you. And Nalo Nalavale is here, our Public Works Director, and will be presenting this item. Good evening. Good to see you again.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to present. Tonight, I'll be providing you an update on the Sahuarita Water Reclamation Facility re-rate upgrades. The improvements for this project will increase the existing capacity of the reclamation facility from 1.5 million gallons per day, or MGD, to 2.2 MGD. I also wanted to say that I'm very excited about this project because it shows that our town still has a lot of untouched potential, and that we as a town are always ahead of the planning game for the various possibilities that comes when we do decide to tap into that potential. So there are two agreements that dictate the operations of the water reclamation facility. The first one being our operating permit, which is the Aquifer Protection Permit, or APP, and that's through the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. The second one being the Rancho Sahuarita Sewer Service Agreement. 80% and 90% capacity are two important milestones under the APP permit. Prior to reaching 80% capacity, the planning and design for the next expansion should be completed, and the construction started prior to reaching the 90% capacity. Under the Rancho Sahuarita Sewer Service Agreement, the planning and design for the next expansion should be completed and approved prior to reaching 75%. So again, our existing capacity right now is 1.5 MGD, which 75% of that is 1.125 MGD. The current usage, or the flows that we've seen this past year, we're looking at approximately 0.94 MGD, and that's just a little over 60% of the current capacity right now. So the last expansion of the water reclamation facility was in 2008. PCL Construction was contracted for those improvements to increase the then capacity of 0.8 MGD to the current capacity of 1.5 MGD. In 2021, we reached out to Carollo Engineers to perform a re-rate study on the water reclamation facility. A re-rate study at the water reclamation facility is basically looking at the treatment rate at various stages of the process and see how we can improve that rate, increase the efficiency of the facility, and still remain in compliance with our operating permit. Carollo Engineers came in, performed the analysis, and presented a few options to the town for consideration. After multiple discussions and evaluations of the options, we decided to move forward with the best and most economical option. Carollo Engineers was then contracted in 2022 for the actual design of the option that was selected. PCL Construction was then later brought on through the CMR, or Construction Manager at Risk process, to help out with the design. During the design process, 30% design and cost estimates, 60%, 90%, and 100% cost plant design and cost estimates were submitted to the town. The 30% design and cost estimate came in at about $8 million. About $8.9 million at 60%, about $8.2 million at 90%, and about $7.07 million at the 100% submittals. So after the review of the 100% design and the cost estimate, we were able to settle on a final guaranteed maximum price, or GMP, of $6,985,377. So the Reway project will see upgrades at the influent pump station, but the three major components of the project are the electrical modifications. There'll be a lot of electrical modifications and upgrades to this project. The expansion of the continuous backwash filters, we're actually adding a couple more chambers to it and then adding a few more filters to the system. And then we're basically increasing the amount of UV filters and equipment, basically by doubling the equipment that we already have on site. We're currently looking at a construction duration of 14 months to complete these improvements. So this one right here is actually a companion item. I believe it's the next item on tonight's agenda. Typically, under a CMR project, the design engineer stays contracted for the construction management services. The advantages of having the engineer on board are timely project delivery, the experience and knowledge of the rules and regulations to keep the facility in compliance during construction, and then the expertise that they have in making sure that the project is built per approved plans and specifications. After a few discussions with Corolla engineers, who are design engineers for this project, we had to look elsewhere to Westland Resources to be able to stay within the budgeted capacity of the project. Westland Resources provided a total cost estimate, or a total cost of $418,000 for the construction management services, which is approximately $250,000 less than Corolla engineers for the construction management services. So in summary, between the construction and the construction administration costs, the total cost of the project comes out to $7,403,377. With that, I'm gonna ask AC for his help on this one right here. Thank you, AC.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So this project is financed mainly by the $5.8 million WIFA loan that we secured last fiscal year. But the project cost estimates that we received as the project was moving along its development life cycle came in higher than what we were anticipating when we secured that $5.8 million WIFA loan. And so when we were looking at the higher costs, we knew that the Wastewater Enterprise Fund did not have the financial wherewithal to pay for the WIFA loan and all the other loans it has, as well as to incur these additional costs. So we knew about this when we developed the fiscal year 2024 budget, our current fiscal year, and we actually built into the budget an interfund loan of up to $2.4 million, where the general fund would loan that amount of money to the wastewater fund to pay for the additional costs. And given the bids that we received that you just heard earlier, the wastewater fund's going to need the entire $2.4 million. So what we have here are some proposed terms for the interfund loan. What we're proposing is that the wastewater fund will repay the loan over a 10-year term. And fiscal year 2026 would be the first fiscal year in which the general fund would receive a principal payment from the Wastewater Enterprise Fund. So essentially it'll just be interest only through fiscal year 2025. And what that'll do is that'll allow the wastewater fund to sort of acclimate to the new operational costs that are going to be incurred when these improvements are completed and they come online.
AC, is that connection fees or user fees that would go back to paying that bath?
Well, that's a tricky question.
Oh, didn't mean to make it tricky.
Arguably, it should be connection fees that pay for 100% of the capacity. but we do have agreements with developers that limit what we can charge on connection fees.
Oh, that's
And
right.
so where they're deficient, we have to make up for that with the only other real revenue source in the wastewater enterprise fund, and that is through user fees.
User fees. But that would be the minority. The connection fee would be the majority.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally,
Yeah.
thanks.
It can vary over time because the connection fee is a one-time source,
Right.
but yes, usually connection fees would pay for the majority of the costs. So what we're also proposing is that the interest rate would be set at 3.2%, and this is based upon the average national 10-year AAA rated and A-rated municipal bond rates as of November 27th, 2023. Why did we settle on that as a rate? Because we believe that our wastewater system, from what we're hearing from our financial advisor, the rating of that system would be between those two rates. Annual principal and interest payments will be approximately $311,000 a year when the principal payments start to take hold, which would be in fiscal year 2026. And then total interest over the life of the loan would be $519,000. And then if the wastewater finances are better off than what we're projecting in the future, the wastewater enterprise fund could make additional principal payments or early payments to the general fund, and they could do so without any penalty, and it would lower the interest costs in the future. So that's what we're proposing for the interfund loan.
Thank you. Any questions from staff now, just as a reminder, when Nalo covered both, the Westland portion of it is the next item. This one is for basically the construction portion of it. If not, I'll entertain a motion at this time. Anybody have it? I do, if no one else does.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to approve contract number 240046 with PCL Construction, Inc. for construction services rendered in an amount not to exceed $6,985,377, and to approve the $2,400,000 interfund loan between the general fund and wastewater fund in accordance with the provisions provided in the term sheet.
Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Nalo.
Thank you, Mayor.
Don't go far. Madam Clerk, item number 13.
Discussion and possible approval of contract number 240048 with Westland Resources for construction management services for the Sahuarita Water Reclamation Facility re-rating implementation project in an amount not to exceed $418,000.
Thank you, and I think Nalo has already covered this, so unless you have any questions for him, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to approve contract number 240048 with Westland Resources for construction management services for the Sahuarita Water Reclamation Facility re-rating implementation project in the amount not to exceed $418,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. I was saving you a few words, Nalo.
Thank you, Mayor.
You did such a thorough job on the first one, I figured we don't need the second one. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 14.
Public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption of ordinance number 2023-170, amending the city tax code to adopt a local use tax of 2%, and by selecting model options number 13 and number 15, and adopting local options number Z, number HH, and number PP, and increasing the transaction privilege tax rate of taxation on utilities from 2% to 4%, providing for severability and designating an effective date.
Thank you. A.C. Mariotti, our Finance Director, will present this item. Just keep on rolling there, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So tonight is the culmination of our efforts on this particular topic, and it's a discussion that began in January during our planning retreat, then again during the April budget retreat, and followed by a lengthy discussion during the September 25th study session on this topic. So we've looked at ways to diversify our revenues, and more specifically to take measures that will offset the deficits in our HERF fund, using utility and use taxes to do that. So to recap the problem, over the next 5 years, the ending fund balances of the Highway User Revenue Fund will decline from a positive $439,000 in fiscal year 2024 to a deficit of $2.4 million in 2028. That's an average deficit of $686,000 annually. And that deficit exists even after the general fund contributes $600,000 to the HERF fund in the way of a subsidy towards the pavement preservation program. Our current projections show that the fund will run out of money sometime in fiscal year 2025 unless something changes. So we got a big red arrow for that. And you see the first cautionary sign is in 2025 where fund balances go deficit. So as we discussed, if we're going to meet the goals outlined in our strategic plan, we're going to have to come up with a long-term solution to the HERF fund. Our share of the state fuel tax and that $600,000 annual subsidy are not going to be sufficient to carry the day and be able to provide for the services that are paid for out of the HERF fund. So last meeting we talked at length on why these deficits exist. It's both a revenue and an expenditure problem. And I'm not going to belabor the point today, but as we discussed at the last meeting, the state fuel tax, or our share of the state fuel tax, is deficient on several fronts. And some of that needs to be addressed by the state legislature, and indeed, at one of our previous council meetings, you've sort of pushed that point along through the League of Cities and Towns to petition our legislature to make some of those changes. On the expenditure side, we have federal mandates driving up costs, aging infrastructure driving up costs, more roadways driving up costs, and inflation also driving up costs. So if we take no action, if that's what we decide to do, then our general fund subsidy will need to grow to $1.34 million a year. So taking it up from $600,000 to $1.34 million. And just to provide some context on that number, that would represent 40% of the general fund's net revenues in a given year over a projected 5-year time frame. So we can do that, or we can look to cut services, and by cutting services you would cut costs, and that would be another way to balance the equation here, if you will. So what are the ramifications if we cut costs and cut those services? Well, here you have a list of the services that are paid for out of the HERF fund, and basically all things pertaining to the maintenance and repair of our roadways, including landscaping and bridges, would have to be cut in some form or fashion. We wouldn't be able to do the same things that we're doing currently and still meet the objectives of the federal mandates. If you look at this list, I think we all agree that these are high priority items, and these items indeed live within our strategic plan. So the proposed solution that we settled on after the study session is as follows. We would amend the utility tax to increase it up to 4%, taking it from 2% currently up to 4%. Provide a tax credit for franchise fees that are paid by other utilities, and we do that by eliminating the Model City Tax Code Model Option number 13, which was highlighted in the body of the ordinance. We are proposing to dedicate the incremental amount, which we're projecting to be an increase in net revenues of $780,000, and dedicate that entirely to the HERF fund, specifically for the streets function. We're also proposing to establish a use tax, and to establish that at a rate of 2%. That is the same rate that we charge for our local sales tax. And then to elect the applicable Model City Tax Code options that are consistent with the state. And we're recommending that to just make it as easy as possible on the taxpayers. So if a taxpayer currently pays the Arizona use tax, then the local use tax would also apply. It'd be a one-to-one comparison. It would just be the rate would be different from the state and the town. We're expecting the use tax to generate revenues of no more than $250,000. We've reached out to the Arizona Department of Revenue to get a better number from them, but the information is just not available to the town due to just protecting sensitive information, taxpayer information. So we're not quite sure what it'll generate. I suspect it's going to be significantly less than the $250,000. And because of that, we're suggesting these revenues just stay within the general fund, and any little bit that we collect will help to offset that $600,000 subsidy that we're expecting to continue into the future. The goal behind this one is more of a tax policy standpoint. And I'll cover that here in just a second. So this proposal meets the following objectives. It helps to diversify town revenues. It stabilizes the HERF funds so the streets division can continue to provide high levels of services. And while it doesn't eliminate the need for general fund subsidy, that subsidy will hopefully not have to increase over time. It equalizes the net combined taxes amongst the water, gas, and electric utility companies. Compared to other municipalities in the county, we'll be tied for the lowest utility tax rate, and we'll be tied with Marana and Oro Valley and still be lower than the city of Tucson or the city of South Tucson. And on the use tax side of things, from a tax policy standpoint, it eliminates the competitive advantage that certain out-of-state businesses have compared to in-state businesses. We're proposing an effective implementation date of March 1, 2024. And just a little bit of correction, I believe the ordinance that you have before you in Provision 8 actually has March 1, 2023. So we cannot go back in time and make that effective. So that's a Scrivener's correction that we'll need to make before it gets adopted. So anytime we're talking about a tax increase, it's a big deal. And so we made a concerted outreach effort, including the items that you see listed here. The initial one being our website posting, which was more of a general posting that we were even considering this. We did that in August, and we invited people to attend the study session on September 25th. Obviously, at that session, we spent quite a bit of time discussing this very topic and settling on the proposal that you have before you today. After that meeting, we provided the specific parameters of the ordinance in a website posting that went in on our website on October. We reached out to the local utility companies in November. In November and December, we had several social media postings, and we also advertised in the local paper, which is required by state law. And then tonight, we do have a public hearing before any action can be taken. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Before I open the public hearing, does anybody have any questions for AC? Before I go to that? Seeing no questions, I'll declare the public hearing open. And if anybody would like to address the council on this matter, this would be the time. Seeing no movement, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance 2023-170.
Diane seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item number 15.
Discussion and possible approval to appropriate available fund balances and to amend the Grants and Restricted Sources Fund budget, increasing Economic Development Division expenditures by $10,000 for use on the Grow in Sahuarita Freeport-McMoran site grant.
Thank you. And Victor Gonzalez, our Economic Development and Public Affairs Director, will introduce the item. And Alex Magallanes, I'm working on that, Victor, Economic Development Specialist, which I think will be presenting for the first time, will be presenting this item. Good evening, Victor.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Yes, we have Magallanes and Tavoyan.
Yes, I know. Oh, jeez.
That is our lesson
Haley,
tonight.
that's your next job. Work on that for me, okay?
So wanted to be brief this evening, but always an opportunity to share the good news and our gratefulness to Freeport-McMoran and the support that they provided to economic development over the years, with no exception with the site grant for $10,000 for the Grow in Sahuarita. So with that, I'll let Alex Magallanes, our Economic Development Specialist, who was hired about 3 months ago now. He is a Sahuarita resident and has a very strong background in small business development. So we're very, very pleased to have him part of our team. And so I'll have him share with you how we will be making use of this site grant.
Good evening, Alex.
Good evening, Mayor Murphy and members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for your time. And there we go. Okay, perfect. So tonight I want to give you a brief update on the Grow in Sahuarita program. This program was designed, I believe, in the beginning of the year. In February, it was launched, and it was designed to provide just business coaching, technical assistance to small business owners in Sahuarita. And about 4 stages were identified, 4 stages that usually a business owner goes through, from ideation to incubation, acceleration. And we have a 4th stage, which is not mentioned here, but is usually transition, when the business owner is ready to retire, sell the business, pass it to the next person in the family. Now, through this program, we decided in a way, or fine-tuned it in a way, that we can help small business owners set up action plans, not only just get the idea, but actually take practical steps and set up a 30, 60 day plan where we can have palpable or tangible outcomes, and we're able to track it. And so when we first meet with entrepreneurs, we will identify any existing weaknesses, and we will help them develop strategies to strengthen these areas. And the goal of all this is to develop sustainability. So one of the things that I love to say, not only as a Sahuarita resident and a small business owner as well, is that if I win as a small business owner, everybody wins, right? So job creation, revenue increase, access to capital, so on and so forth. And so once we identify these areas, we also work with them to identify any business who will need to be prepared to access capital. And so part of my background is working for CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. And so I know the lending side of the small business very well. And so part of my job is to help them be prepared for that and access that capital. Now, in order to achieve this, we adopted what is called the growth wheel. And so I like it because the program is called Grown Sahuarita, and then this is the growth wheel, so it goes hand in hand very well. And the growth wheel is a cloud-based platform that acts as a client relationship management, or CRM tool, and also acts as an interface to interact with the client. And so one of the things that I love about this platform is that we give access to each one of our clients, which we currently have 48 in the program. And all of them have been contacted, have been followed up. We've been having sessions. And also my counterpart, Hillary, who is a temporary economic development specialist and also helping in the coaching. And so we give each client access to this platform, and the beautiful thing is they have access to this platform for life, and it's at no cost to them. So some of the things that they're able to do in this platform is we're able to create a 360 business assessment where we assess the skills of the entrepreneur, or we'll assess what are the opportunities of the business. Once we identify those things, then we're able to set up a 30, 60, 90-day plan. We implement what it's SMART goals, right? So it needs to be measurable, it needs to be attainable and relevant, and we need to have a timeline so that we can actually convert them into outcomes. And so we're able to track things like budget, financials, projections, and even employee hiring. And to do this, the Growth Wheel provides worksheets that they're called decision and action worksheets to just take practical steps towards the growth of the business. And so following this, I would like to give you just a screenshot of what the platform looks like. So as you can see, obviously we're able to enter into the software, and we're able to send the invitation to the platform and track the outcomes, the decisions that they're making, know how many days they've been engaged with the program, when was the last day or the last time that we engaged with them. And so the model for the Grown Sahuarita program is that once you're a client for life. And that's really what we're intending to have here, is we want to keep those businesses here. We want them to grow. And more so, we want the next generation of entrepreneurs to also engage in this program. And so our goals for the first year of this program is to reach 120 business connections. So there's currently, we have around 624 business licenses in town within city limits. And so we kind of broke that down into 5 years. And so we want 120 business connections for the first years. How are we going to accomplish this? We want at least 90% of those to become an actual Growing Sahuarita client. And so far, well, actually, this is outdated. We have 48 small businesses enrolled in the Growing Sahuarita program. And we have sent out 2 email campaigns to the 624 business licensees, on which, the first campaign was to the Growing Sahuarita clients, and 47 recipients at the moment. We had 67% open rate. And then after that, we follow it up with phone calls. And then we sent out another email campaign. In this case, it was only 582 recipients. Sometimes when they input their email address right on the business application, the business license application, they have a misspelling on their email. So that was reduced to 582. But we had a pretty good open rate. And so what happened after this is that we started receiving inquiries about the program. Some people started replying, some people started making the phone calls. And so we're following up with them to welcome them to the program. And soon after that, we started having sessions with them. And the feedback started coming in. So we've been receiving very good feedback. This is a post we actually came across from one of our clients, which is called Sugar Boogers AC. And they're also part of our vendor list for the events. And they're part of the Growing Sahuarita. And she posted this right after one of the sessions with Hillary, our business coach, and where she says that she came in feeling the weight of the responsibilities of having 2 businesses. And then after the session with Hillary, she was very grateful, and she felt the clarity of the support that we are providing through the Growing Sahuarita. And so this is just a little bit of the fruit that this program is already turning. It's already giving, and we look forward to more. So, we're very grateful that Freeport-McMoran has definitely supported this program. And so with the $10,000 grant, we hope to continue providing this service, fully adopt the growth wheel, and move forward from there. Any questions?
Well, thank you. Every state of my town, I always talk about how grateful we are for copper, how much I love copper. And I also know that, grants don't just come to us. So thanks for the team for submitting a good grant, that we were able to actually receive that. And it's been a pleasure to work with you even a short period of time, because whenever I reached out on any question or issue, within a day, I get a response back and a follow-up on that. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome to the team. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I've got something.
Oh.
This is a good program.
It is.
I appreciate it for the town, and I would be happy to put forth a motion.
Thank you.
I move to approve the appropriation of available fund balance and to amend the grants and restricted sources fund balance budget, increasing economic development division expenditures by $10,000 for use on the Growing Sahuarita Freeport-McMoran site grant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thanks for being here, and thanks for all the hard work on to the good doctor's comments on the Growing Sahuarita program. Really appreciate it. Item number 16, Madam Clerk.
Presentation and discussion regarding administrative provisions removed from the town's personnel policy and placed in the administrative code.
Thank you. And Jessica Silva, our Human Resources Director, will be presenting this exciting item. And no pressure, but you stand behind us and adjournment on this particular item. So
absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I do tend to speak quickly, so we'll get out of here pretty fast. So as you all are aware, we have made revisions to the personnel policy, which you have approved this evening. The last time that I was in front of you, we talked about what items were remaining in that personnel policy. I'm going to quickly go over what the administrative code is and what items we've taken out of the personnel policy and put into the administrative code. So the purpose of this is to discuss those items that are removed from the personnel policy, and then receive feedback from town council regarding those. So our previous personnel policy contained both legislative policies and administrative procedures. And any change to that policy had to be approved by town council. The legislative policies require review by the attorney, the manager, and council approval. They provide direction to staff on what we need to do, general parameters for human resources, and provides philosophical direction and guidance to the organization. So basically, town council says, here are our ideas, make it happen. The administrative procedures only require review by the town attorney and manager approval. They are task or action defining, and they are specific in nature. So they allow us to carry out the policies that you have set forth in the personnel policy and establish actions necessary to support the philosophies that you all have set. So with the administration of this, the responsibilities are for the town manager to administer the provisions of the personnel policy, recommend changes and amendments to those policies, and amend the administrative code as necessary. Department directors, managers, and supervisors are set to implement those policies and also implement the administrative code. Am I talking too fast?
Nope.
Okay. I'll talk faster. All right.
Well, I caught the manager and the attorney has the ability to do that. And those are the two people we hire and fire. So if they don't do what we say, we're good to go, right?
There you go, exactly. And I'm done. No. Okay. Uh-oh. I think my battery's out.
We wore out the battery
I did.
tonight. See, I told you
My
to talk
battery.
fast.
We just gotta go.
I think Lisa's going to help
Help.
advance.
And I was making such good time.
I am ready to make a motion.
Well, this is actually.
But there's no action,
This is
Vice
discussion
Mayor.
only, so she just needs feedback.
Is there a second?
Jessica,
Where are we at?
kind of.
It should all be in your packet.
Responsibility.
Should be in your packet.
Yeah, it's in our packet.
So the list of items that were removed from the personnel policy are in your packet. And those can be added or deleted as necessary to serve the purposes of the organization. So for example, town council sets, say, merit increases. So it's up to the manager to approve the administrative code that deals with pay practices that talks about how those merit increases are administered. Same with leave management. The town council will approve,
The
vacation policy, holidays. The administrative code sets out how we are going to administer that and how leave will be managed. So among our administrative provisions are the Americans with Disabilities Act. It outlines how we comply with the legal requirements for ADA rules. Corrective action, if there is an allegation of misconduct by an employee, this sets out procedures and how we are supposed to respond to that. That can include reprimand, suspension, demotion, or dismissal. Donated leave talks about how employees may donate leave for use by other employees, eligibility requirements, etc. Next slide, please. Drug-free workplace outlines our policies and procedures used to maintain the drug-free workplace, employee records, family medical leave. It basically outlines in how we comply with the federal law, what employees need to do to file a grievance, both formally and informally. Harassment, discrimination, hiring procedures, what we do if an employee needs light duty, and our pay practices. As we discussed earlier, timekeeping, how to administer pay. Personnel actions includes promotions, reclassifications, demotions, layoffs, and resignations, how to maintain the personnel policy, what we are going to do for our employees to promote their professional development, how to manage remote work, particularly now that we have the 410 schedule and council is requiring flexibility for all departments, what our social media policy is, and what the proper use and access to those accounts will be. How employees will deal with town property, town vehicles, what we will do with travel and training and what the rules are for that, use of technology, workplace safety. So these, as I mentioned earlier, the administrative code sections can be added or deleted as necessary with approval by the manager for the effective and efficient operation of the town. Departments may also elect to develop and establish their own policies and procedures if those policies and procedures conflict with either the administrative code or the town personnel policy, then those policies will control and the department will need to adjust. Questions?
Thank you. No, I mean, we always have ample opportunity at our strategic planning sessions, you know, to weigh in on policy, and I think that's the way government's supposed to work. We set the policy and the staff carries it out, and I'm good with it when I reviewed it. Everybody else good? Good? Okay, thank you.
I think I set a record.
Absolutely. And before I adjourn, I just, you know, feel blessed to get to work with each one of you over this Christmas season, and just feel blessed. So I hope everybody has a happy holiday and Merry Christmas. And January, well, Happy New Year. It's all gonna, don't drink and drive. It's all gonna come fast and furious. So, and for all the staff that's still sitting here, we're just really grateful for all your hard work and all the different things that we carry out, from Park and Rec to safety to growing Sahuarita to all of the above. So having no more further business, we're adjourned.